That being the case, I would like to call to order the Tuesday, April 12th, 2022 meeting of the Commission of Historic and Architectural Preservation. Yes, sir. Thank you. Um, as usual, if I start to my left, this is all distant memory here. But if we could call the roll, starting with Commissioner Penza.
Laura Penza, Penza Bailey Architects and Studio of Time A. April.
Matthew Moscow, representing Baltimore Heritage.
Kate Edwards, Deputy Commissioner for the Development Division and BHCD.
Good afternoon, John Bullock, Councilman for 9th District and Representative for the Council of Mixed Committee.
Ann Powell, and I represent Greater Baltimore Committee.
Manat Renan, representing Preservation Maryland.
Tom Legal, Chair for now.
And Eric Holcomb, Executive Director.
All right. As we have a quorum, we may proceed with business. Our first item of business will be approval of last month's meeting minutes. Commissioner, you should have received meeting minutes in your pre-meeting package. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, may I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
A motion, do I have a second? Second from Commissioner Penza. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstained. Thank you very much. Motion passes. Our next topic is the consent agenda. We have a total of 5 items on the agenda. 3600 Clipper Mill Road in the Woodbury Historic District. They're requested to construct a second story on a non-historic addition. Applicant is Con Wong and staff reviewer was Anthony Stewart. Second item is 1605 Lemon Street in the Union Square Historic District. Proposal is retroactive approval of a 2-story addition to be reclad in brick. Applicant is Jordan Taylor. The staff reviewer was Tyreek Charlius. Third item is 515 Nottingham Road in the 10 Hills Historic District. Proposal is to demolish a fire-damaged garage and construct a new 2-bay garage. The applicant is Dana W. McKee, and the staff reviewer is Tyreek once again. And last, we have 2126 to 2130 Madison Avenue in the Madison Park Historic District. The proposal is demolition hearing 1, determination of architectural significance. The applicant is the Berg Corporation, and the staff reviewer is once again Tyreek. Commissioner, you've had this in your packets. We've suggested this to be on the consent agenda. Are there any items you would like to remove from the consent agenda? Hearing none, may I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion from
Second.
Bullock, second from Commissioner Renan. All right. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of moving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? And abstained. Motion carries. Thank you very much. And now on to our regular agenda. Our first topic of discussion today is the Sarah Ann Street Historic District designation hearing 1. The proposal is to determine if the historic district designation is ready for formal consideration by CHAP. The applicant is the Appleton Neighborhood Association, and the staff reviewers were Eric Holcomb and Stacy Montgomery. Stacy, please take the lead.
Okay, good afternoon. So our first item today is the determination if the historic district, the proposed Sarah Ann Street Historic District designation, is ready for formal consideration by CHAP. And I, Stacy Montgomery, am the presenter, and the applicant is the Poppleton Neighborhood Association. So here we see the proposed Sarah Ann Street Historic District outlined in red on this map. Just going to run through a few images. Here we see it set back in the context of the site, just below Route 40. Step back again in West Baltimore, just right below Mulberry Street and West 40. And here we see an aerial view of it facing the south elevation. All right. And these are the houses that have been demolished around the Sarah Ann Street house. I'm going to try this pointer. I hope that it works. Here we go. So these are the Sarah Ann Street houses here. And the houses that are in red have been demolished. And here we see a view of that block of Sarah Ann Street, the 1100 block of Sarah Ann Street, which includes 1124, which is a vacant lot, through 1102 Sarah Ann Street. And these buildings are currently owned and maintained by the Department of Housing and Community Development. Here we see the more of Sarah Ann Street. And this is facing the opposite direction where you see the 3-story building. And I'll give you some context here. Just went through a couple images. Just a close-up in one of the buildings. The rear elevations, as you can see, are fairly intact. All right, let me go back to look at this view here. All right, so situated on an alley named Sarah Ann Street near the northwest section of the Poppleton neighborhood, this block of alley houses comprises 11 brick houses on the north side of the 1100 block of Sarah Ann Street. 10 of the houses are 2 stories high, 2 bays wide, and 2 rooms deep. The house at 1102 Sarah Ann Street, which is the end structure on the east side of the block, is 3 stories high. Built circa 1870 as a row of 12 houses, that was 1102 to 1104, with flat roofs of the then popular Italianate-style row house with simple wooden cornices that are currently covered by this black tar paper. Set above a slightly projecting brick frieze decorated with brick modillions. The cornices imitate the style of the more elaborate cornices of the 3-story early Italianate row houses, which have wooden cornices framed by scroll sawn and brackets that have friezes decorated with scroll sawn modillions. These alley houses have simple, flat wooden door and window lintels and sills that may have originally had 2-over-2 sash windows. No original sash remains, and most of the windows have now been replaced with 1-over-1 sash windows. Each doorway has a narrow transom, possibly originally with 2 lights seen as today with 1110 Sarah Ann Street. I think we can find a close-up of that. Each house is only 2 rooms deep, with stairs located along the western wall of each house, directly behind the doorway. The stairs rise from a single flight from the first floor rear room to the second floor front room, and there's no entry hall area. The door opens directly into the narrow front room. On the rear facades, there's a small square window, which we saw, we'll show it again, that is located on the second door above the back door. The opening undoubtedly dates to when indoor plumbing was added, and that now lights the bathroom. So the summary significance of this proposed district. Situated on the alley street named Sarah Ann Street near the northwest section of the Poppleton neighborhood, this block of alley houses demonstrates distinctive characteristics of a circa 1870 alley houses, an increasingly rare building type in Baltimore City and in all other East Coast cities. Alley houses represent a small-scale house type built on a narrow, small street that paralleled or bisected wider streets with middle-class houses. Alley houses have provided housing for Baltimore's working-class residents. They are simplified versions of larger row houses ornamented with various architectural styles. Today, the majority of alley houses built in Baltimore and in other older East Coast cities have been demolished, making Sarah Ann Street a rare survivor in Baltimore and largely on the East Coast. Alley houses are integral to the historic fabric of Baltimore's row house neighborhoods, helping to define the intimate human scale of 19th century Baltimore. In the Poppleton neighborhood, these houses are the sole survivors of an intact grouping of alley houses. This uninterrupted grouping of alley houses beginning at 1102 and ending at 22 Sarah Ann Street provide a significant representation of underdocumented history of Black homeownership and residency in Baltimore in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Built circa 1870, the Sarah Ann Street houses provided affordable housing for African Americans and other working-class residents in the period right after the Civil War. Together, this row of historic houses offers important resources on African American history in West Baltimore and largely. So we'll go through again. And here you can see that little window on the second story. All right. So the background, all right, we'll look through this. So staff applies for designating all historic districts in Baltimore City. Staff applies the criteria for evaluation. The quality of significance in Baltimore's history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, and culture is present in districts, sites, buildings, public interior structures, and objects that possess integrity of location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association, and one of the three. First, that they're associated with events that have made significant contributions to the broad patterns of Baltimore history, or that they are associated with the lives and persons significant in Baltimore's past. And the third, that they embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or that they represent the work of a master, or that possess high artistic values, or that represent a significant and distinguishable entity whose individual components may lack distinction. And fourth, that they yield or may be likely to yield important information on Baltimore's history or prehistory. So these are the criteria we use to evaluate all of our districts and landmarks. And in staff's initial analysis, staff determined that the Sarah Ann Street Historic District is eligible for local district designation under both criteria 1 and 3. So that is that it represents the housing and ownership of African Americans during the period from the 1870s through 1970. And third, that the Sarah Ann Street Historic District is significant because it represents the unique alley house type, a rare survivor of Baltimore's 19th century working class housing. Here's a background chronology. Another piece of this designation hearing, part 1, is to understand the background and the outreach that's occurred for this designation. So outreach began, this is just actually the 2021 outreach. There's been outreach ongoing since 2007, but really picked up in 2020 and 2021. So you see, in June of 2021, members of the Southwest Partnership Historic Preservation Committee, the Poppleton Now Neighborhood Association, Councilman Bullock, Dr. Nicole King, they attended a walkthrough of Poppleton with Eric Holcomb, the executive director. And on August 3rd, 2021, Dr. King emailed Eric Holcomb to request the CHAP work with residents and preservationists on moving the local historic district into the initial phase. And let's see, we'll keep going through. So on January 3rd, on November 16th of 2021, CHAP sent a letter to the property owners letting, we always do a survey to determine who in the proposed boundaries owns a district and who is interested in being part of a district. And we sent that to 12 properties, and they're all owned by the Baltimore City Housing and Community Development. And they're all interested, well, it was one ownership, they're all interested. And there was also, on January 3rd, a letter of support from Housing and Community Development. And then we've received a lot of public testimony recently. So as of this morning at 9:30, there were 170 emails in support of the proposed Sarah Ann Historic District. Those 170 letters all support the proposed district. 168 of those 170 letters also are writing to request the inclusion of 319 and 321 North Carrollton Street as part of the historic district. As we mentioned, this wasn't what was advertised, but that was a request to add those properties in. And there are 2 emails that just support the district generally. All right, so now let's talk about the boundary justification, which is important. So the boundary of the proposed local district only includes the row houses and their lots for 1102 to 1124 Sarah Ann Street. This includes 11 intact houses and 1 lot where demolition has occurred more than 20 years ago. Thus, it will include an intact alley house row. The 11 houses are a rare survivor of alley houses and homes associated with African American life in Baltimore. The boundary includes all of the row houses that support criteria 1 and 3 of CHAP's criteria for historic district designation. Therefore, boundaries conform, our boundaries must conform to these requirements. The local government certification under the National Historic Preservation Act, the chapter I think you can see there, and the Secretary of the Interior standards for identification and registration. So, in light of all of that, so in accordance with CHAP's rules and regulations of designations of districts and landmarks, staff worked with the Poppleton Neighborhood Association and Sarah Ann Street stakeholders and identified potential boundaries in the local historic district, applied CHAP criteria for evaluation, and the Secretary of the Interior's standards for identification and registration, and confirmed the compliance with the proposed designation with the requirements for local government certification under the National Historic Preservation Act. Staff determined that the proposed district meets these requirements for local designations as established by the Commission. Therefore, staff recommends the approval of the Sarah Ann Historic District because it meets CHAP criteria 1 and criteria 3 for evaluation. The proposed boundaries are supported by findings of facts that the outreach to property owners and property owner responses were sufficient. And so the outcome of this hearing is to request that the staff prepare a full and proper study with findings of fact for presentation of designation hearing 2, which is where the commission would formally approve and recommend to the city council this historic district to move forward. So this is just stage 1, recommending that we move forward with a full and proper study where we do much more substantial research and provide a larger presentation. Are there any questions?
So, 168 of the 170 voters were in support of expanding the boundary of the districts.
Yes.
Was that considered, and why were those two properties not included?
I'm gonna ask Erica.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, we did consider it when we worked with the.
Your mic's not on.
Thank you. Yeah, we did consider it. When we worked with the community, we created a working map that included the boundaries. And then when we showed what we were working on to the property owner, HCD at the time, and other city officials, we discovered that there is a legal contract between Baltimore City and the master developer for the Poppleton development. And in that master contract, the city is going to be required to acquire the properties, relocate the residents, demolish those properties, and hand over the properties to the developer. So if we did include those in there, we would create sort of a designation of law that would contradict another legal action by the city. So that's pretty much the reason, and that's the reason why ACD was not in support of including this.
And yet the alley houses, as they are currently configured, are actually drawn boundary and meet all of the designation criteria.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, other questions? Hearing none, we now get to take public testimony, and with that, what is our, I guess we're up to the day. Do we have anyone from HCD who would like to address the commission as the property owners? And if not, we will start by calling people up in order here. And John Hopkins, you're a lucky winner. Please come up and let's see here.
May I take my mask off? Is that allowed? Thank you. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is John Hopkins. I'm with the nonprofit organization Baltimore Heritage. We are, of course, here to support the Sarah Ann Street designation. But as your director, Eric Holcomb, mentioned, I would like to focus my testimony on the 2 Carrollton Street houses. I started this journey in Poppleton along with the Edie family 19 years ago, and a gentleman named Tom Ward, Judge Ward, formerly City Councilman Ward, who 40 years before that was the one who drafted your ordinance that you are using today to determine the fate of this neighborhood. He did that in the 60s, in the 90s and 2000s. He worked to try to save this section of Baltimore City. We heard in the chat, staff made a compelling argument for why pursuing the Sarah Ann Street houses. I want to address the argument about the Carrollton Street houses. It is true that they are included in an agreement between the city and the master developer, but it is not a foregone conclusion that listing them, including them in a CHAP district, precludes demolition or precludes any development opportunity. That argument just does not hold water. I have reviewed your meetings for the last 4 years. Over the last 4 years, you have had applications for and approved demolitions in Marble Hill, Mount Vernon, Fells Point, lots in Fells Point, Howard Street, Union Square, lots of CHAP designated buildings demolished in Union Square, Sharp Leadenhall, Jonestown. Over the years, CHAP has allowed not only buildings inside districts, but city landmarks to be demolished, the Southern Hotel maybe being the biggest one. And some of you, I believe, were commissioners when an entire CHAP district was allowed to be demolished, Duncan Street in East Baltimore. So the idea that including it inside the district necessarily prevents demolition is not a foregone conclusion. So the question is, though, why would you do it? And let me just conclude with two reasons. One is we are now 19 years into this development proposal, and we have had phase one, I believe, completed, and I could be wrong a little bit on this. So by including those two houses, we will be asking commissioners who will be seated in this room maybe in the year 2032, maybe in the year 2042, to make a decision on whether those two should be saved or not, if the world doesn't change and the development plans don't change. So by including them now, you give them the CHAP protection and status that they deserve, leaving it to a future commission as is appropriate to decide their ultimate fate. Number two is there is a value in listing them, including them, even if ultimately they're demolished. And that, of course, is the documentation and recordation that would go along with demolition. The Maryland Historical Trust, in fact, provides grants each year for purposes of that. It is a very real value to document the history of those houses, even if they are ultimately demolished. Final word, though, I want to say is that this is about two houses. That is true, and about one predominantly active family, the Edie family. But it is more, this issue is more than about a building or two buildings. This issue is about what are these historic preservation laws for? Who are they for? Are they for the people who live in Baltimore, in our neighborhoods, and fight for our neighborhoods? Are they for an abstract development concept that may or may not come to fruition? You all right now have the authority and the challenge of making a decision on what direction historic preservation in Baltimore is going to go. Is it going to go for just bricks and mortar in a house, or is it going to go for the people? The Tom Ward approach in the 1960s. His own house was demolished. He fought back by getting elected to city council and drafting your ordinance to protect people like him who are living and working and fighting in Baltimore's neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions, Mr. Hopkins? Hearing none. We have, looks like Derek McCary signed in, but not just indicate whether he wants to speak or not. Right, okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have Tony Scott from the Southwest Partnership.
Good afternoon. I almost wish that this was outside because it's so beautiful today. Thank you for your time. We submitted Tony Scott, Executive Director for the Southwest Partnership. We've already submitted our letter of support, but just wanted to provide presence and also read it here in your hearing. So the Southwest Partnership Board supports the residents of Poppleton in the establishment of a CHAP local historic district for the Edie and Sarah Ann Street properties to preserve a part of the rich Black history of Poppleton neighborhood. The designation does not impinge on development or improvements by property owners, but CHAP reviews all exterior changes to buildings within a local historic district. As Johns Hopkins was eloquently put, it does not preclude the city from meeting its existing obligations, but provides a historical review that a historic Black neighborhood deserves. Summary statement of significance: Black history and homeownership in Old Poppleton. Some of this was already alluded to by Stacy, but the interrupted group of a dozen row and alley houses beginning at 319 North Carrollton Avenue and ending at 1102 Sarah Ann Street provides a significant representation of the underdocumented Black history and homeownership in Southwest Baltimore, beginning in the late 19th and lasting into the 21st century. The connected row of houses was built circa 1870 and includes both traditional Baltimore row and alley houses. The surviving houses along this block are significant and criteria that Stacy mentioned earlier, criteria 1 and 3. The Sarah Ann Street alley houses provided affordable housing for African Americans in the period right after the Civil War, while the larger 3-story Italianate row house on 319 North Carrollton Avenue, which by the way is over 150 years old and has been owned by 2 Black families since 1928, so about 94 years, demonstrates the perseverance and the upward mobility of Black homeowners There's obviously clearly a lot of community support for the preservation of these irreplaceable cultural and historic resources in Poppleton, as exemplified by what's been stated before. And I just wanted to thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Scott? Hearing none. Next up, we have Nicole King with UMBC.
Yes, Miss Edie didn't know that she needed to sign up. Do you want to go before then? Okay. I just want to make sure Miss Edie,
I'll make sure we have two EDs signed up here, Curtis and Sonia, to begin with. We'll make sure you have an opportunity.
all right, just making sure. So hi, I'm Nicole King. I'm an associate professor and chair in the Department of American Studies at UMBC. And all of the many public presentations I've given on this local historic district under discussion today over the past 9 months included both the alley houses on Sarah Ann and the row houses at Carrollton Avenue. Together, this connected row of 1870s alley and row homes provide context for the neighborhood's diverse housing types and sizes, one of the great assets of Baltimore City neighborhoods. So the city signed an agreement back in 2006 to preserve and to offer the Sarah Ann alley homes for home ownership. It is clear with the research Dr. Mary Ellen Hayward, Baltimore Heritage, CHAP, and others have done that Sarah Ann clearly meets criteria 1 and 3 and merits preservation. Furthermore, in 2021, Dean Kreml of Creative Museum Services discovered that the first homeowners of Sarah Ann were Black women. In 1873, Catherine Kate Kennedy purchased 1102 Sarah Ann. She owned the home for 13 years before selling it in 1886. Loretta Williams paid $300 for 1124 Sarah Ann in 1905. She owned the property until 1928, mortgaging it some 16 times. And she used the property as collateral for other real estate ventures in an era when Black Americans had little access to capital. The Edie home at 319 North Carrollton Avenue is more than 150 years old. And for the past 94 years, as Tony Scott said, Black families have owned this home. In the Poppleton Historic Study submitted by Dr. Phoebe Stanton to Robert Embry Jr. of the Baltimore City Department of Housing and Community Development, in 1975, Dr. Stanton, who is the namesake of the boardroom we're in, wrote, "The needs of Poppleton should take precedence over all other considerations. Provision for these human requirements and sensible treatment of the historic and architectural character of the area need not conflict." On Block 155, where the Edie home is located, Dr. Stanton wrote, "The Carrollton Avenue houses are very well kept. The street is truly presentable. With time, houses of this later 19th century architectural style may acquire more admirers than they have been." And Dr. Stanton was not known for flourishes or overstatements. Nearly 50 years after Dr. Stanton's report, the 19th century architectural style does indeed have more admirers and more historical significance. The fact that the city took and demolished many of the very properties Dr. Stanton documented in the 1970s makes this row of homes along the highway to nowhere even more significant. Built in 1871 by local carpenter George Maloney, 319 North Carrollton was part of a group of 8 row houses erected on the half block stretching from Sarah Ann to Mulberry Streets. Noted historian J. Thomas Sharp was 319 North Carrollton's first owner. He is known for his histories of Baltimore and being one of the first American historians to use newspapers as primary sources. He also fought in the Confederacy for slavery during the Civil War. Sharp's ownership was short-lived, which became a pattern over the next decade as the property changed hands often. Sharp and his support of the Confederacy and the institution of slavery connects the historical research and reparations underway on the slave holders who founded St. Luke's Episcopal Church, now St. Luke's Youth Center, which is located just a block from the Edie property at 319 North Carrollton Avenue. In 1882, 319 North Carrollton Avenue, its ownership stabilized and the home was then owned by only 4 families since. And since 1928, as Tony Scott said, 319 North Carrollton has been home to 2 Black families, the Sewells and the Waugh Edies. As such, 319 North Carrollton Avenue speaks volumes about the underdocumented history of Black homeownership in Baltimore. Donald China Law bought 319 North Carrollton from the Sewell family, who he refers to as distant cousins, in 1992. Mr. Watt grew up and still lives around the corner in Poppleton, and was one of the early Arabers at the Carlton Street stable. He is featured in Roman Freeman's iconic book, The Arabers of Baltimore, from 1989, and the film We Are Arabers from 2004. Among other research on Baltimore Arabbing, Baltimore Arabbers won a 2021 Heritage Award for Maryland Traditions, the folklife program of the Maryland State Arts Council. Mr. Watt purchased the home for his daughter to build generational wealth, which was often denied to Black residents throughout U.S. history due to redlining and racist lending practices. Many of those practices originated here in Baltimore and unfortunately have continued into the 21st century. In 1994, Mr. Watt deeded Carrollton Avenue home to his daughter, Sonia, and her husband, Curtis Eady, who are both here with us today. Curtis Eady Sr. is a contractor and a minister. Sonia Eady is a dedicated community volunteer. She serves for neighbors as president of the Poppleton Neighborhood Association, representative to the Southwest Partnership, and on many boards of local nonprofits, such as the Southwest Sport and Fitness Alliance and St. Luke's Youth Center. Sonia and Curtis Eady Sr. raised their 5 children and now host their many grandchildren in their row home, which has been meticulously restored and maintains its historic integrity. Much of that work was done by Mr. Eady himself. The Eady family rebuilt and restored their home after a 2012 fire with city permits, and they want to stay and to continue the work to build a better future for their neighborhood and the city. Due to a long-delayed development project, this block offers one of the few remaining contiguous row of homes of this diverse type and character in solid condition in Poppleton. The city agreed to preserve Sarah Ann Street back in 2006. Now, 16 years later, the Carrollton Avenue homes add to this important architectural, social, and historical significance of this rare surviving row of homes representing Black homeownership in Poppleton and in West Baltimore. We must begin to center equity in our preservation and planning decisions in Baltimore City. We have not preserved and invested in Black history in the same ways we have white history. We cannot change the past, but we can preserve the Sarah Ann and Eady homes for future generations. As I often say to my students, buildings only matter because people built, inhabited, and gave them meaning. People make buildings homes. That is what has been happening in this block in Poppleton for over 150 years, despite redlining, despite destructive highway construction, despite the abuse of eminent domain, and despite disinvestment. Black people still built homes here. It is our job to honor and respect that history. I employ CHAP commissioners to add the Eady family home back into the map and to show that historic preservation values people, not just buildings, and that this city stands with its Black legacy residents over outside developers and profits. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. King? Hearing none. I'm going to continue to call names. Just so everyone knows, if you didn't sign up, you'll still be offered a chance to speak after I call all the names. So don't worry, we'll get to everyone here. Next up, I have Curtis Eady, who did not indicate whether he wanted to testify or not. You're welcome to come up if you'd like.
Good afternoon. A little about myself. I'm Pastor Curtis Eady. Started ministry here in Baltimore City as a servant. I served 25 years in the penal system at MTC, Metropolitan Transitional Center, where I pastored the church inside the penitentiary. I've also yielded a citation from state and city for 25 years of service in the penitentiary. I also began a youth ministry within juvenile justice. I'm going to say some 30 years ago. I'm not trying to revisit that in juvenile justice as a servant, as yourself, a servant of Baltimore City, to help with some of the other issues. Howbeit, I do appeal to this commission concerning the love and the care that we have put into 319 North Carrollton. We have put our heart into it, and of course, we have raised our family with 5 kids and 13 grandchildren. All has a love and future. We are thankful that you will have us here today, and we look forward to your seeing our side and giving us opportunity to be a greater investment to Baltimore's community.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions from the community? Hearing none. Next up, I have Sonia Eady.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and I'm glad to be here. And I thank you all for welcoming us to this hearing. It's so good to be in person. Thank you. I have 2 things I would like to address. First, I would like to address that I wish that we had showed the pictures of the certain Ann Street houses just from last summer when they were fully occupied and the neighbors congregated on the rear park area where the benches were with their little boom box, their chairs, and their barbecue grill, you know. And these weren't young folks; these were people of age that congregated as a family that helped one another. And so, with that displacement that the city did on these people last summer, you know, I just don't see how we can continue to consider homes over people. Another thing concerning the street, I remember those being homes when they were both on both sides of Sir Street, and also Colton Street. I grew up in that neighborhood. My dad purchased his house at 323 North Curry Street in 1971, the same house that he still resides in today. So I remember Sarah Ann Street, and we didn't refer to it as an alley street. It was Sarah Ann Street. So while I support this historic district for Poplarton, my family has deep roots in the Poplarton neighborhood. My grandparents moved to Poplarton in the 1950s. They lived at 327 North Carlton in a 3-story home that has since been torn down. My dad often reflects on his memories of growing up in these homes, how they had outhouses and had to bathe in a big tin tub, how they had to boil the hot water on the stove. The house heat was of coal, how in the morning the house would be freezing and him and my uncle would have to go down to clean up the ashes. He shared how he and his siblings would all sit around my grandparents' bed and listen to the stories on the radio. And my grandmother called him to the room to tell jokes to make her laugh. He also recalls playing on the back staircases and sliding down the banisters, and how every Christmas he would help my grandmother paint the walls. Listening to my dad's many stories about living at 327 really gives me and my family a deep appreciation of our home. The way he describes things, you can really get a vision of what these houses were like in their heyday. It's like being home again for him. He is so proud that we decided to move our growing family here and make this our home. He still resides at our childhood home. It was around the corner from me. It was a brand new home that the city had just built in a redevelopment in the 300 block of North Curry Street. The city did what I was told then, slabbed it to the vacant lots. Our house was a sample house, 4 bedrooms, 1.5 baths. The late delicate Ruth Kurt also purchased one of the houses when, where her husband still resides today, moving forward. At one time, my family circled the block in Poplarton. We could leave our back doors and enter one another's homes. 323 North Curry, 318 North Carlton, 1203 and 1211 West Marlboro, and 300 North Curry. And they were my immediate family, not including my distant cousins, 310, 319, and 328 North Carlton Avenue. I say this to say, it's a shame that they tore down the, the four three-story houses in my block in 2021. They were in great condition and was fully occupied up to 2018 when our last neighbors was pushed out through the eminent domain law. I get offers regularly in the mail and via email for the purchase of my home. I know, like Ms. Stanton said, these homes would have been desirable and off the market had they not been demolished. Even though I did not live in this block, I grew up and always admired the beauty of the block with its architecture, marble and slate steps, and tree-lined street. It was a beautiful sight to see with its neighboring family feeling. My first employment happened here, Carlton Avenue, scrubbing marble steps and running errands for the elderly. My second employment, young teen, braiding hair on a marble stoop. This block truly embraced me as a kid and my family as an adult. Poplarton has lost so much. I remember throwing rocks on the rock fields left from the houses from the highway to nowhere. Neighborhoods are nothing without people and houses. So I ask the board to please consider preserving what is left that people could see and not have to rely on the memory of what used to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Keating? Hearing none. Next up, we have Ronald Miles.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ronald Miles, and I will tell you that I am really filled. I have written something for you, but today I'm talking straight out. I worked for the city of Baltimore for 14 years. One role was as a real estate officer, where we sold the properties to developers under disposition agreements. And again, every disposition agreement actually had a timeline to it as to what it was doing. Also, I worked for the city when it was flush with federal funds for urban renewal areas. So we can go all the way back when Poplarton was first designated as an urban renewal area. Although I was a real estate officer with the city, I also was a neighborhood project coordinator. This was a component of the city that provided technical assistance to the community. I was assigned to the Poplarton community from Mulberry Street all the way to Cherry Hill, Sharpland, and all the Carlton Ridge. And I would tell you, we had a very dysfunctional operation. You had the planners and you had HCD. And I will say to you, as again, when the funds were so, able to be in the city and we were creating those urban renewal plans, you'll find that Poplarton never had an assigned, what they call the PAC, Project Area Committee. They did not give Poplarton a technical employee to work at the Poplarton Community Association, but as an HCD representative, I filled that role. But I was always many times in conflict with the planning department, whereas, I was the one who educated the community in regard to what was going to be acquired and what was not. So we kind of went in with predetermined representatives. Again, we had a vulnerable community. Poplarton, unlike Oliver, Johnson Square, and Midtown, not Midtown, what is it called? East Baltimore, Midway, Park Heights, they had a structure. You had over here a Poplarton, which was a PAC, Project Area Committee, and you had a COIL. And again, it was diversion between the COIL, Community Organized to Improve Life, and the Poplarton Community Association. I, as a mediator, had to bridge those together. So again, when the planners came in and white. You're in the middle of that kind of thing. So it goes back. And what I'm looking at now is where was the community informed when a disposition agreement was provided, and then you had the amendments to the urban renewal plan? Who was there to assist him to work with him? I would tell you, and I would think that was a void. It was a void. So we always have disenfranchised, communities, not only in Powhatan, but throughout the city, where we have our vulnerable communities, where planners who are college educated come into play, dealing with our vulnerable communities, presenting plans, and then the community saying, I'm sure we did not understand when we put in the acquisitions that then took so long to acquire. So, and even on the disposition agreements, whereas a delay and a delay and a delay, this particular community, as I'm listening to the Sarah Ann Street project, evolved itself. We're talking about Miss 80 moving back to 2000 something, whatever. But this thing was in a place. I worked in neighborhood, what year was that? I guess 1980. Yeah, 85 to like 2000. That's my time with the city of Baltimore. But again, getting out to the community, re-educating them to share what changes might take place. I love that happens. We have to be addressing ourselves. And then I know that CHAP is always limited in their staff resources. We have the planning department and you have HCD, whereas now they dismantled the neighborhood project coordination section, the section I used to work in. Who's providing them this particular education? And I'm more on top of many more things now, looking at many of our disenfranchised communities. And I have appealed to the department to educate before demolition. Share with the community what might be significant in the community prior to just listing properties for acquisition, disposition, and what they call it, removal of slums and blight. Miss Edie is a developer. She's a human developer versus a developer who's in for a profit margin that looks at the physical aspect of a community and not the human aspect of the community. So again, my name is Ronald Miles. I'm not a community activist. I'm a community servant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Miles? Hearing none, I'm going to continue to call names. Commissioners, we do have a lot of topics to cover today, so if you could keep your remarks brief, we would greatly appreciate it. But everyone will have a chance to speak here. Next up, we have signed in but not indicating which to testify or not, Kevin Gallagher. No comments. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Sarah Fouts. Once again, do you wish to testify? Oh, no comment. All right, thank you very much. Carrie Banishevsky.
First of all, you said my name beautifully. Thank you. My name is Carrie Banishevsky. I am the Fiscal Development Manager for the Southwest Partnership. I am reading a letter today on behalf of Mr. Scott Cashnow, a board member of Southwest Partnership and the chair of our Historic Preservation Committee. Mr. Cashnow could not be here in person today. Mr. Cashnow had previously submitted a longer letter to the Commission. For the sake of time, I will be reading an abbreviated version. Dear Commissioners, I am writing today in support of the Poppleton Community Association, Poppleton Now, and their request to create an historic district for Black home ownership in Old Poppleton. I am sorry that I am unable to deliver this testimony personally, as I will be out of town, camping with my children, and recognizing that these are precious moments that we cannot get back. I hope that you will receive this testimony with the same consideration as if I were there to deliver it personally, as I feel very strongly that we should create a historic district for Black home ownership in Old Poppleton. I am a resident of the Franklin Square neighborhood. I live about 3 blocks from the corner of Sarah Ann Street and Carrollton Avenue. I am also very involved in my neighborhood, and among other roles, I serve as the chair of the Historic Preservation Committee for the Southwest Partnership. I helped create the Southwest Partnership in 2012 to give the the residents of our neighborhood a stronger voice by banding together and supporting one another. For the past several years, the Historic Preservation Committee of the Southwest Partnership has worked along with researchers, professors, and community members to document and preserve the Poppleton neighborhood and the stories of the residents that have lived there. We all certainly want to see the Poppleton neighborhood revitalized. At the same time, we must ensure that it is not done at the expense or detriment to the residents that live there and the important history and lessons that the neighborhood holds. I hope that you will take this step and create the district, and I hope that you will define the district as it was proposed and as the map produced by the city in February outlined, by including the houses on Sarah Ann Street as well as the houses on Carrollton Avenue. I am fully in support of CHAP creating an historic district for Black homeownership in Poppleton, and I hope you will be too. Sincerely, Scott Kirsten. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Jackson? Hearing none. Next up, we have Tuesday, Baynard Woods.
Hi, as a reporter covering the city over the last decade or so, I kept hearing one refrain, two refrains. How did it get like this? The question and the answer always, if only we would have known. 7 years ago today, Freddie Gray was thrown into the back of a police van and killed. After that, there was great attention to all of the decisions made in rooms like this to put those police in the pathway of that young man that day. And people said, if only we would have known about redlining, if only we could have stopped that. Reporters like CHAP commissioners have the ability not to see the past as something that's just irrecoverable, but it's history that's part of the continuum with the present and with the future. And so you have the opportunity to make the right decisions, to see the displacement of families like the Edie's, to see the displacement that's already happened in that neighborhood as part of the tragedy. The people in the future will be asking, how did it get like this? But unlike so many other people, you have the ability, you have the power to stop those things from happening. You have the power to keep Black families in their homes in Baltimore. We won't have to stand there as the mayor and many other city officials did recently on the highway to nowhere and lament the destruction that is already too late to fix. Because of you, we have the chance to stop that destruction from happening where it is right now in its tracks. Too much destruction has already happened at the borderline of the Edie's property to where we can draw that line and not cross it, where we can preserve not only that house, but the sense of the future will have on us as Baltimoreans at this present moment. Thank you.
Hearing none. Next up, we have John Murphy.
Well, that's a difficult act to follow. But you know, we really have to think about this a little bit. I'm almost, every time I think about Poppleton, I'm at a loss for words, frankly. I hope everybody realizes what's happened here. Mrs. Edie talked about it to some extent. But with respect to the Sarah Ann houses, back in 06, they were designated for preservation and home ownership. Back in 06. How long ago was that? 12 years, I guess. And what happened after that? What happened after that was that the city acquired the houses and evicted the residents. I'm not blaming you CHAP people for this, but as a citizen of Baltimore, I don't see how we can sleep at night when that happened. Here we had a formal document saying the houses were to be preserved for home ownership. And the city came along and sent letters every resident evicting them. So then there's nobody left there. We talk about home ownership. Well, that's a joke. Those were those people those were the homes. They were rental homes, but as in Baltimore, rental doesn't mean that you don't own. That's your home. It's your home. Whether you rent it or own it, it's your home. People live in rental homes for generations. So this is a real first class tragedy. What happened? There's no other way to describe it. You can say it was a mess up for the city. Maybe they shouldn't have done it. I don't know. I don't know how it happened. Mr. Mayor Woods is right. We've got to keep asking ourselves how this happened. So with respect to the Sarah Ann houses, I would strongly recommend that when you designate these houses, you put a suggestion there that the original residents who were evicted be contacted and asked to move back. We can at least try to repair what happened a little bit. I mean, it seems to me that we ought to do that. I wrote a letter to CHAP in last summer asking for immediate designation of these houses as landmarks. And I got back a bureaucratic letter from CHAP saying for any number of reasons it couldn't be done. But the result was that those people were evicted and left. So let's try to repair to some extent what happened. But let's try to put a recommendation in that those people be contacted. I'm sure they have their names. It's very difficult to move several times. I've been doing eminent domain my whole life. It's the most stressful thing in the world. I've had 3 people who died during the process. It's an extraordinarily difficult thing. But at least we can contact them and see if they're interested in moving back. This was a wonderful little neighborhood. I remember being out there and seeing the people playing, the children playing. They had a playground set up right opposite these houses. It's a real first-class tragedy that happened. No doubt about it. There's another tragedy that relates to Mrs. Edie's house, and that is, this is what, 14 acres, 17 acres, 14 acres? This is 14 acres, 14 city acres. It's a big tract of land, right? You know how many houses, how many occupied houses out of all the houses that are to be condemned, how many occupied houses are left? How many? Anybody got any idea? Anybody got any idea? Do you have any idea, Commissioner? Huh? Anybody have an idea? It's one. It's one. The Edie house. It's the last one left. Isn't that astounding? I mean, there were about 200 or 300 households, homes, that were condemned as part of the so-called Poppleton renewal. All of those people are gone. They're history. That's the second tragedy here. I mean, words can't really describe it. And it wasn't for a road, at least for the road next door, they had a purpose, build a road. This is for a gentrification scheme to bring in, upscale housing. But these people were sacrificed for this scheme. They're all gone. There are hundreds and hundreds of houses that were condemned. They're all gone. The last one standing, the last resident in the house is Curtis and Sonia Edie. Now, it seems to me that in itself is a reason to preserve that house. That in itself. I mean, there's no way we can describe what happened here. We talk about, used to be called Negro removal, now it's called Black removal. Well, that's what happened. First class. This ought to be written up in the New York Times, really. It's a real first class tragedy. But at least we could say, the Edies will not be moved. And this idea that there's some legal restriction is just, with all respect to Mr. Holcomb, nonsense. The super block is a historic district. That's all that comes before CHAP. Some of those buildings may be torn down, who knows? But the idea that it's in an urban renewal area where it's condemned means nothing. So let's put the 80 house in as just one effort, a recognition of what happened here. What happened here was a first-class tragedy. I keep saying the 80 house, I lived on Union Square for 10 years. The 80 house is no different than the houses, say, in Union Square. It's a plain old Baltimore row house. Reverend Union has fixed it up to excellent shape. It's a fine, fine house. But the idea that it's somehow not historic is the same as any number of hundreds of thousands of Baltimore row houses. So this is Holy Week, time of penance, time of, we're all sad. We ought to be. We ought to be sad about this, frankly. I'm not blaming you folks, but as a citizen of Baltimore, this is not a happy situation. And we can repair it by the Sarah Ann houses at least making a recommendation that those people be contacted and asked to come back. It's supposedly home ownership. And with the eating house, don't even think about not including it. Don't even think about it. It's not worthy of a thought. Of course we have to include it. It's the last occupied house in Poppleton.
Mr. Murphy, I think you've made your case.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Last up, who's signed in here is Blanca Gonzalez. Please.
My name is Blanca, more known as Cecilia Gonzalez. I have been a resident of Baltimore City for over 6 years, and I live a couple of blocks from the block that we are fighting to save. And as someone who I grew up in Ecuador, I have lived in this country for close to half of my life, and so I have seen how in this country people really appreciate historic buildings and the historic nature of things. But what I would like to say and repeat, as a lot of people have said here, is that we should really appreciate more the life of people and the community that they create. And even though I grew up in another country, I can definitely relate with how my neighbors grew up, with a lot of spaces, with a lot of life, roaming the streets. One of the first times that I was at Sarah Ann, I talked with Miss Sonia's dad, Mr. Donald, and he immediately started telling me of all the things that he grew up seeing, like the place where they would go get coal, or the corner store where they sometimes would even borrow because they were neighbors, so they knew each other. And as someone from a place where I can still see those little corner stores and that life and the parks and places where you can run around, I really want to appeal to your conscience as people, because you're elected officials, to preserve that rich life. Because it doesn't matter whether you're poor or rich in resources, but the life that we have, that richness, that's really what is worth preserving. And so I'm here in support of preserving both the Edie's homes and also the Sarah Ann Street homes. And I would hope that the city can really, in all the departments, be able to practice development without displacement, because so far we've seen development with displacement. And if it was up to the will of the developer in that LTDA that has a hold in our lives right now, it would be, all of Prototon would be erased. And if you see his plans that he has in the brochure, all of Prototon would be something else, and all that would be left would be Prototon Square. And so we really need to make a change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Gonzalez? Hearing none. That concludes people who have signed in to testify? Is there anyone else in the public here who would like to speak before the commission? Please, come on up. If you could state your name for the record, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is China Terrell, China, Terrell, Terrell. I'm spelling it for the record. I practice from being a lawyer, and that is what I want to mention, actually. So I am a lawyer, a corporate lawyer, and I graduated magna cum laude from the University of Minnesota Law School, and I also have my master's in public administration from Harvard University. And so when I hear this argument that we cannot save Edie home because there is a conflict between two legal documents, one of them being a contract, that breaks my heart. And I think that John Murphy referred to that as nonsense. Since you used the word, I'll use it too, because I actually think that it's the truth. The first thing that I learned in my contracts law class was that they are actually made to be broken. And it's true. Contracts are made to be broken. And guess what? The developer knows that. And that is the reason that he has broken this contract so many times and then put the city in a position to have to renegotiate it with him, such that now the agreement that the city is relying on to say that, oh, we can't possibly create a conflict means only whatever the parties want it to mean on any given day. And so to really point to that paper, which has been amended and re-amended so many times and violated and compromised so many times, only proves that contracts are made to be broken. One other point, because I know we gotta wrap up, but I heard at the very beginning kind of this idea that, we have to choose between the building and the people, historic preservation, the building and the people. But, John's, which did a beautiful job, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of historic preservation is that it's actually all about telling stories, right, Commissioner Powell? It's about telling stories. The buildings, the bricks, the mortar don't mean anything without the stories of the people who occupied those buildings, without the stories of the architects who created them. That's what historic preservation is about. It's about telling stories. And so for the time that we've been here, we have heard so many beautiful stories. And if we haven't heard enough, then we can go to everything that Nicole King has created, which, oh my God, bless you. You have a gift from the living Lord for being so steadfast and so strong and really providing support and standing in the gap where we needed it. Baltimore City cannot thrive without its working class population. Am I right? Without a working class population, we are nothing. Every economy that is robust, it has to be diverse. And that includes not only the well-to-do and the well-heeled, it also includes the kind of people that started out on Sarah Ann Street, that are now in the Edie home, that have moved to middle class. And in the stories that we heard how homeowners were using the houses as collateral to finance their business ventures. Last thing, Black wealth is a ticking time bomb nationally. It is a ticking time bomb. Nationally, we have $5 trillion of Black wealth. It is a drop in the bucket compared to what white wealth is nationally. But guess what? Here's the challenge. Half of Black wealth is in pensions and entitlements. What's the problem with that? You cannot inherit it. You cannot pass it down to the next generation. So right now, what this commission has an opportunity to do, and it doesn't matter to me that I'm looking at like 7 white people and 1 Black person, because I know that diversity is not just how we look, it is also how we see. And I also know the people individually on this commission, and I know their hearts, and I know that many of them probably stand where I am standing right now. But we have an opportunity to close the gap between the city's rhetoric and the city's action. And right now, the rhetoric is, we're going to support Black, we're going to be bold, we're going to be like DC was in the 1970s, we're going to give opportunities to Black people. Yes, there's a Black developer on the other side, but we cannot do this in a way where all of a sudden we're stripping homes away from Black homeowners, where we're evicting renters who should be homeowners. That strip of houses was bought for only $200,000. OMG. So Johns Hopkins could have raised that money in his sleep, okay? So I'm just saying that we have an opportunity here to close the gap between the city's rhetoric and the city's action. This conflict between a legal document and another legal document, one of which is a contract, no, like, that is just not a leg to stand on. It literally is not. And that's why I started with my background. So I just really appreciate you all for taking the time to listen. Please help us close the gap between the city's rhetoric and the city's action because we want to believe in the rhetoric. We want to believe that it's real. And we want to believe that Baltimore is for everybody. And we want to believe that there is not a tale of two cities. And we want to believe that working class people matter regardless of their color. And we want to believe that Black neighborhoods matter and that all neighborhoods matter. And so you all really have an opportunity to help us do that today. Thank you so much.
Hearing none. Is there anyone else here who'd like to testify? Yes, ma'am, please come up. And state your name for the record when you get to the microphone, please.
Hi, my name is Shannon Darrow, and like everybody else who's testified here today before the commission, I urge you not to just preserve the pretty, beautiful architecture of the brightly colored homes along Sarah Ann Street, but to preserve people in place, particularly in ways that preserve Black wealth, that allow legacy residents to remain in their neighborhoods. I'm a contributor of Baltimore Revisited, an anthology edited by Nicole King, her colleague at UMPC, Kate Drapinski, and UB professor Josh Clark Davis. And my chapter specifically looks at the history of cross-class, cross-racial, cross-neighborhood organizing in Baltimore against highway construction. And even though that terrible stretch of the highway to nowhere got built, those families were displaced, citywide, people were successful. People used historic preservation as a tool to protect their neighborhoods, like not just the architecture, but their neighborhoods. The sad thing is when you look at the outcomes between Fells Point, South Baltimore, and a middle-class Black neighborhood like Rosemont, completely inequitable. You know, in some ways, the success of organized investment helped create what we call the white out, where Black neighborhoods have not seen that level of investment. Secondly, I'm a professional in the housing and community development field. I've worked in neighborhood revitalization at an organization similar to the Southwest Partnership, and it's absolutely possible to do development without displacement. Not just equitable, but ethical practice starts by kind of building those partnerships with legacy residents, whether they're homeowners or whether the people who live there as renters for a long time and are engaged in neighborhood life and have some ideas about things that they want to see, but don't have the capacity to move them forward. Help them find building, help them find resources. Finally, I'd like to echo what last speakers have said about kind of the tragedy that we talk constantly about building wealth through homeownership and how that can be and historically has not been a way of addressing racial wealth gaps. I've worked in foreclosure prevention, tax sale foreclosure prevention, kind of home repair programs that help elders remain in their homes. Kind of putting a family out kind of undermines that work that is getting a lot of traction in the city right now. And I would like to say it would be great if we could contact families who've already been displaced, offer them a right to return, or if they're not in a position where that's something they want to do, kind of offer them some sort of compensation where they can kind of relocate into a neighborhood of their choice. Thank you.
Hearing none. Is there anyone else who'd like to address the commission? Seeing none, we will now close public testimony and go to deliberations. Mr. Bullock.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, I want to just. It is on. All right. I just want to thank everybody for coming out today. Again, obviously, this is a very sensitive issue for many. I have the pleasure of serving on CHAP, but also being representative for 9th City Council District, where the Poppleton neighborhood is located. As was mentioned before in some of the comments, had the opportunity along with Eric Holcomb to meet with members of the community. And over the summer, one of the things that we shared was that even if even if the Edie's home would be part of the district, it wouldn't necessarily prevent anything in terms of demolition. So, and I think they've also mentioned that they understood that as being one of the components of this. Also, I know there's been a lot of discussion around the development in Poppleton. And so, again, we know there's been some stalls. We know there's been the land development disposition agreement that the city has entered into. Again, which is a legally binding document. There's been long court cases. I won't get into that whole history. But what I will say is I think the staff really did a really good job in terms of documenting that history, making sure that folks understood what the requirements were. I am also of the mindset, though, that having been inside of the home and also having seen the exterior, that it is historically significant, given its time period, given the architecture, given the way that it's been maintained. I do understand the conflict that we find ourselves in. And then also in terms of, as you mentioned, having it being advertised in terms of the district. So my suggestion would be to include the additional properties as part of the historic district. Again, I think there's an argument to be made for history. Again, that was very well documented. And again, I know that staff and the commission have a lot to really deal with at this point in time, but that's my suggestion. So thank you.
Thank you. So to summarize where we are right now, we seem to have three potential actions. We could, despite the, significant public support here, deny the request to make it a historic district. We could approve it as is, or we can, in essence, table this, remand the study back to the staff to investigate the addition of the Carrollton Street homes and come back next month. So with that, we have additional discussion, or can I get a motion?
I would just like to add that I think if that's the course of action you want to go is to ask that staff include and look at including those properties in. I think we can get that on the May hearing, and I still think that we could get a hearing 2 done in June, and then once that's done, we would have the full and proper study that we could hand over to City Council and after the June hearing. So that's sort of the timeline I'm thinking.
Commissioners?
I'll start to just say, I appreciate all of the compelling testimony that we've heard today. I must admit, 168 positives to include the properties out of 170 was compelling enough, but what I've heard today, absolutely, I'm convinced that this should be allowed to, the 80 properties should be allowed to be expanded and included in this historic district. And I am confident that there is attorneys in town that can work to make the legal documentation work. And I'm in agreement with the time frame is the most that we can push through and get this by June would be wonderful. So I'm in complete agreement with.
So would that be a motion potentially?
If we're ready for this?
We seem to be kind of at that point.
I motion, let me just check what's up.
Could I add something before the motion? I just want to say that just as a representative for DHCD, that I am supportive of the district, the Sarah Ann houses being included in the district. And I do believe that it does create a conflict for us to include the ED houses, and I just want to kind of put that on the record as far as the legal contract that we have currently.
Thank you.
So just as far as the motion, of course, anybody can make a motion, but that would I just needed to say that. So go ahead.
Commissioner Penza?
I would say for a motion, I would recommend approval of the Sarah Ann Street Historic District, including the house properties on Carrollton Avenue and
So to be technically, we can't do that, but we can remand it back for further study.
That's right.
To come back
we would table it in that effort to include.
I have a motion to remand back for further study. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from the good councilman. Is there any further discussion?
I would like to add, also, I think Mr. Murphy had an interesting process. I don't know how feasible it is to include or to contact past residents, and especially if many are elderly or rental, but I think that would be a good thing to include here, to ask that in the process.
All right, so I have a motion to remand back to staff further study to include the Carrollton street properties and the sentiment of the commission to try and find ways to encourage former renters back, although that's not within our purview. I have a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstain.
Abstain.
I have one abstention. Ms. Edwards, thank you very much. Motion carries, folks. We'll see you hopefully back next month. Thank you all. All right. You're welcome to stick around for the balance of the hearing, but if not, if you could please exit quietly to the back. We still have topics to cover here. Our next item is 600 South Caroline Street in the Fells Point Historic District.
Nice to see you. Haven't seen you in a long time.
Hey, folks, we're going to gavel out for 2 minutes to allow people to clear the room.
Okay, now we've got still 5 minutes to go.
Topic of conversation is 600 South Caroline Street in the Fells Point Historic District. This is the final review to construct a 4-story vertical addition. The applicant is Jason Development, and our sponsor is Eddie Leon. Eddie, please take it away with all things.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, we have for your consideration a final review the 4-story vertical addition that you've seen for the proposal at 600 South Caroline Street in the Fells Point Historic District. Justin Cito is the architect. This is the Meyer Seed building located on South Caroline Street, Alisana and Fleet Street. The building is uh, proposed to have the addition constructed on top, as you've seen in the previous iterations. The background is the project will consist of 172 luxury boutique apartments with ground floor retail. It's been through review before us in the December 2021 CHAP hearing and approved the height, massing, and scale, and made other recommendations. At the February 2022 CHAP hearing, the Commission approved the concept design and staff recommendation returned to the full Commission for final materials and detailing. The applicant proposes to construct a 4-story tall vertical addition. That will have 100 one-bedroom and 72 two-bedroom units in the upper floors. The CHAP staff reviewed the these are the previous iterations that came in December, and then later in earlier this year in 2022. The CHAP staff reviewed this under Preservation Guidelines, Chapter 2, Design Guidelines for Additions, New Construction, and Non-Contributing Buildings. Staff applied the following sections of the Baltimore City Historic Preservation Design Guidelines in reviewing the proposal: 2.4 building features, 2.4.1 building entrances, 2.4.5 roofs, 2.5 materials and detailing, 2.5.1 doors and windows, and 2.5.2 materials. The applicants have returned with and provided to the Commission their the details, colors, and details about windows, doors, and other facets of the building. They are in the final phase of selection of the colors. They have come up and 2 color schemes for the proposal. The first one is a 2-tone light gray with a dark gray banding proposed for the building site here. These are 2 views that give you a subtle impression of what it could look like. The second is a darker color for the hardy panel system that they wish to employ. Staff finds that the proposed construction details as provided meets the CHAP Commission recommendations from the February 2022 hearing motion and also meets the design guidelines. The addition is designed to be a secondary to the historic base of the former car showroom garage. The applicants proposed 2 color schemes for the new addition. Staff recommends a single gray shade color image, the darker single color shade that they have submitted. The Fells Point Design Review Committee was provided the plans and did make recommendations, mostly leaning to the single darker color shade in their review. They also requested additional details and information regarding the retention of some murals that exist on the existing Meyer Seed building. Recommendation is approval of final design. Staff recommends the color scheme of the 1-tone dark gray color. Thank you, Commissioners.
All right, thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Leon? Hearing none. We have 4 people signed in, none of which are necessarily indicating a desire to testify, but I'm going to call you out in order. Nick Preble.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Nick Preble here from the Chasing Companies. Really just wanted to take a minute to thank the commissioners, CHAP staff in particular, Eddie Leon, as well as the planning staff and Caitlin Aldett and Tamara Woods. I think as many of you know, there are 5th or 6th public hearing about not only the Meyer Seed project, but what was known as the Shepherd Electric building next door. And this is a transitional area. This is the westernmost boundary of the Fells Point CHAP district. It is also the boundary of IMU before we get to what we call Harbor East, Downtown East zoning. So it's really a lot of the Fells Point low-rise was immediately abutting the high-rises of Harbor East, or a block to the east of the Central Avenue Bridge and just to the south of the Perkins Somerset Old Town redevelopment. And so taking that into context, we show how historic preservation can be an important part of such large-scale redevelopment plans. That's something that Chasen has made a focus of a lot of our projects throughout this point in the Mount Vernon area. And so we're excited for the chance to preserve this building as well as the historic building outside the CHAP district to the west of the Shepherd Electric building, and a total of 272 apartments, new retail amenity space, as well as a complete renovation of the streetscape along Alisana, Fleet, Eden, and Spring Street. And that's something we've been working with the urban designers and the planning department there. So again, I just wanted to thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions. I also have my colleague Drew Keese here from the Chasen Companies, as well as the project architect Justin Cito. I'm sure one of the three of us will be able to answer any questions you have. And as lastly, I urge you to approve staff recommendation.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Preble? Seeing none, next up we have Justin Cito. If you care to address the commission, there's no obligation to.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here in person. My name is Justin Cito, a project architect for 600 South Carolina Street project. I'm glad that we're at this process to this stage, picking the final coloring and detailing materials. We've been through the journey of going through the design, and I think the whole process has been smooth, and we have worked with the community intensively, especially Nate. And I think we have already shown the community different color schemes that we propose. We have shown them a variation of a green color with different tones of greens, same as the blue. And then I think their input was that they want to have a more simplified color scheme to go with the simplified addition on top of this historic building. And so we presented two new schemes, which is one is a darker gray and one is a lighter gray. I think they prefer the darker gray, but we are actually happy with either one, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Cito?
When you said they would prefer who?
I mean, we're talking the DRC, the design, the review committee, yeah, the Fells Point.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Cito.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Charles Peace.
Thank you very much. Nate covered it, so has Justin, so appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Last but not least, we have Reed Match. All right. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to testify before the commission on this matter? Seeing none, commissioners, deliberation time.
Go ahead.
I would make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
I have a motion for staff recommendation. Do I have a second? Second from Max Over to Mr. Mosca. It's a tie. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approval of the staff recommendation of the final design with the dark gray color, final details to return back to staff, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstain. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Our next topic today is 1925 to 27 Alisana Street in the Fells Point Historic District. Proposals to construct a 3-story row house with a garage front. The applicant is Adam Carvalho, and once again, our staff presenter is Mr. Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, ladies and gentlemen, we have again for your consideration 1925-27 Alisana Street. This project is located again in the Fells Point Historic District. Is currently been reviewed by the CHAP Commission back in June of 2021. Separate item is two separate lots. Commission approved the demolition of the facade party wall of 1925 and approved the demolition of a 1-story shed in 1927. The commission then reviewed and considered the application that had a design that called for a inclusion of a front-loaded garage plan. Um, the application was also for there was also an application put in for a curb cut, which had been denied in May 2021 at the time by DOT. Didn't meet the curb cut policy at the time, and the applicant submitted curb cut appeal. There are additional details about the curb cuts and other information submitted by the architect in the packets by Mr. Carballa. The site was reviewed for new construction in July of 2021 in a full CHAP commission hearing. The commission voted to approve the general height, mass, and scale of the proposal and disapprove the front-loading garage. Commission directed that the architectural details should be refined to reflect a more contemporary design, and the final details to be considered by the full CHAP commission. We also, for the record, this is Mr. Carballo's memo to the commission with details about the process and other processes in the city. We have received, as of this morning, a letter from Councilman Zeke Cohen, which I'll read to the commission now. Dear members of the commission, for historic and architectural preservation.
We also received copies of it,
okay.
So no need to read it into the record.
And they support, his office supports the application by the applicant. The building is located here in Fells Point at the edge. If I can get this to right here. Next is the larger 2001 Alisana project. It has no rear alley on the site. I'm sorry. The applicant proposal is to construct a 5-bay wide, 3-story tall residence with a front garage and a roof deck that spans the entire width of the property, set back to the facade 8 feet. The plans have been revised as per the motion requests of the commission. Staff applied guidelines, Chapter 1, Design Guidelines for Building Exterior, Chapter 2, Design Guidelines for Additions, New Construction, Non-Contributing Buildings, Chapter 4, Design Guidelines for Historic Landscapes. I'll just touch upon directly the design of the original proposal. This is the one from 2021, which included a storefront front first floor, main entrance, and a traditional carriage-style garage entry. The second revised proposal includes a design where the garage entry still exists, is disguised as a storefront entry design. Under 1.18 alterations additions, the revised proposed new facade incorporates the false front storefront that opens into the front loading garage. It is located on the front facade where there's no historic precedent. The front loading garage does not meet the design guidelines. Under 2.4.3 garages, there is no historic precedent for the front loading garage on this property, and the minimal historic precedent for front loading garages on Alisana Street, which is a primary street in the neighborhood. The front loading garage does not meet guidelines. We have views currently of the structure, the shed addition, and the main building, 1925, pardon me, Alisana Street. Streetscapes, 4.1.1 streetscapes. The south side of the 1900 block of Alisana Street has largely intact historic granite curb. The installation of the curb that will necessitate the removal of the granite curb in front of the garage. The front loading garage will also alter the historic vehicular circulation pattern. In this view, on the bottom right, we see the historic curb in place. This is a view of the system by which the storefront would appear when closed and could appear similarly when opened for garage entry. The Fells Point Design Review Committee did review this previously and, as of my knowledge, still supports the project. Additionally, we've learned from other department planning staff that the building does lie in a floodplain. So the space, but could, yes, theoretically house a car. Recommendation, approve height, massing, and scale. The proposal disapprove of the front-loading garage. The architectural details of the false storefront does not conform to the guidelines, which is not permit the creation of a false historic facade. Disapprove the curb cut at this location, since there is no historic precedent at this location. And final details to be considered by the Florida CHAP Commission. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Mr. Leon?
I have a question. It's written about Councilman Cohen's letter. He says in the second paragraph, the Department of Transportation has approved the curb cut and we believe it meets the technical standard and threshold for allowing a curb cut. Do you know what that means?
It's changed since the first hearing.
Okay.
This is the previous
Oh, that's right.
hearing.
This is from April.
So,
This is dated today. So it means the technical standard for the Department of Transportation, I'm guessing is what that means, not necessarily.
correct. It meaning that there's enough sidewalk distance and there's enough turn radius possible. So,
Okay.
And presumably they're putting more parking spots in than they're taking out by the curb cut, so the trade-off is fair in the Department of Transportation's mind.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
So is it approved by the Department of Transportation?
Is approvable.
It's approvable, but it's not
I would
yet
say,
approved.
yes.
Okay.
I see.
Nice clarity.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Leon? Seeing none, we have 3 people signed in, only one of which actually indicated wishing to testify, and that's Adam Carvalho. So I'll call you up first if you'd like to chat.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you, Eddie. If I could clarify, we did actually receive a curb cut approval from DOT in the late summer of last year. It was actually occurred the day before our last CHAP presentation. And it does, as Eddie mentioned, it does meet the technical requirements of the curb cut. If I can just sort of briefly provide an overview, where this property is located, these are 2 existing lots, both purchased by the same homeowner, Miss Jackie Boone, who's unfortunately not here with us. She's out of the country. I believe her niece is here to potentially add some additional points after I present. Ms. Boone is making this her primary residence. This is not an investment property. This is a single-family home for a lifelong resident of Baltimore City who chooses to live here in our neighborhood. I say this not only as her architect, but I'm also her neighbor too. I live on the 1800 block of Alisana. My office is on the 1800 block of Alisana, as it has been for 18 years. And I welcome people moving into our neighborhoods that want to make a lifelong commitment to being engaged in our community. So it's not only me working for her as a client, but really as a neighbor. And I think we should encourage that. The 1900 block of Alisana on this south side of the block is kind of a forgotten block. There is a weird hodgepodge of commercial buildings, residential buildings. There's 1 or 2 vacant lots. It's a very sort of forgotten part of the historic district because it's sort of on that boundary. It's sort of in such a disarray architecturally and aesthetically. I think some people kind of forget that it's part of the district. In 1923, Alisana, someone built an illegal 3rd floor addition and an illegal doghouse for probably because they didn't think that they were in the right district. We also had a recent changeover on the commercial storefront in 1900 where they did a number of sort of unusual things to the outside of their building. They illegally widened the historic brick opening in the front facade. They added illegal signage and so forth. And quite honestly, I think it's because people don't realize this is part of the historic district. In Ms. Boone's case, she's followed the protocol and followed the rules since the beginning. She didn't skirt the rules. She didn't try to do something that she wasn't supposed to. We've presented to the FDRC and found support there. We've also presented to Fells Point Residents Association and Fells Point Main Streets. Both of those 2 community groups support us without objection. We presented the front-loaded garage. No one had any objections at those 2 public meetings. addition to that, in addition to Councilman Z. Cohen's letter of support, we also have a letter of support from Mr. Chris Richards, who is a neighbor across the street in 1922, who is probably the most person affected by this change of the front-loaded garage. His property is located directly in front, and you should have his letter of support that was, I believe, emailed to Mr. Holcomb and as well as the rest of the board. Further to that, that support and the fact that we do have an improved curb cut and we do meet the technical requirements, this is an opportunity to have. These are two properties that are 15 feet wide. The property is 30 feet wide. In order to meet the technical requirement for a curb cut, you can't have any opening that's greater than 50%. Right there, that sort of eliminates about 95% of the properties in Fells Point because they're just simply not wide enough to support that. This is a very unique condition. If I look at the immediate micro area, we have a front-loaded garage in a curb cut at 1922 Alisana. There's one at 1914 Alisana across the street. 1910, 1916, there are curb cuts that are across the street to allow parking for surface parking lot. 1902 Alisana, it's a private residence, a historic opening across the street. 1915 office, which is the engineering office of Shepherd Powell Associates, next to the Darbar restaurant. There is an existing curb cut there. They've actually put storefront glass where a garage presumably was possibly decades ago, again, just a couple doors down. And then a little further on the 1800 block at 1827, there are two carriage doors on the south side of the block on 1800 Alisana Street. It isn't without precedent that there are openings in this immediate fabric or context on the 1900 block. Eddie mentioned earlier that we did receive approval for demolition of the front facade as well as the party wall. And that's really to ensure that we can build a sort of nice wide single-family house. The front facade, we believe, was altered in some way over the course of decades. It doesn't really have any historic merit to it, and therefore CHAP did approve the demo of that property. We are retaining the existing floor joists, which we believe are historic. For that, we are in a floodplain at this location. The requirement for floodplain for FEMA is actually NAV 88 plus 5.4 feet. Baltimore City requires 4 feet above that floodplain, so an elevation of 9.4 feet. It effectively makes the entire ground floor unusable if we were to have any occupied space on that level. If you go to Fells Point, the intersection of South Washington Street and Alisana routinely floods. This is the closest intersection of this property. Not even with a big storm, a heavy rain, not a named storm, that intersection will flood. And as a person who's lived a block and a half away from there for the last 18 years, I know that intersection very well and know how to navigate around it when we have a rainstorm. So there is a technical issue here that puts modern floodplain considerations in design with historic preservation. Aside from just meeting the technical requirements, the first floor of this property is effectively unusable. I could put a garage there, I could put parking there, but an occupied space, utility, and so forth has to be above 9.4 feet of elevation above sea level, which it effectively can't be used. So we want to minimize, there's a programmatic incentive to minimize the occupied space on that lowest level. And for that, our first floor will have additional parking and be able to provide at least 2 additional parking spaces by removing the one, in theory, one public space in the front. The contention in the front-loaded garage, there was an alley behind this property, or presumed an alley, that was closed, effectively, when the larger apartment building was built behind at 2001. I think it was 2001 Alisana Street, which is, I can't remember the name of that building, but it's under construction. It's a large multi-unit apartment building being constructed, that has been it's under construction currently. closure of that alley, we could have had off-street parking from the rear. And this wouldn't even necessarily be an issue. However, that alley is no longer in existence. So our really only opportunity is to come off of Alexander Street. Further, I know that, presenting these groups, there's always this consideration of establishing precedent, whether it's a negative precedent or a positive precedent. And I think that when you look at this property, the fact that it's 30 feet wide, and we have the opportunity to build a new facade here, this is a very unique occurrence. I don't think this is going to create a negative precedent where you're going to see a rash of front-loaded garages trying to be popped up all over Fells Point. Who has a 30-foot wide house in Fells Point? Probably only Jack and Boone, because they just don't exist, especially not properties that aren't already protected historically, where you can alter the front facade. So I think there's a very minimal, if not I just don't think this is going to come up again as a precedent. On the positive side of precedent, putting in a well-designed, attractive home on this block hopefully will be a catalyst for the rest of the block to sort of, quite honestly, get its act together and, put more investment onto that block to improve the structures that are already there. And I think this could be a real anchor point to sort of spur, redevelopment and restoration of those existing homes that are there. That's basically what I have. And just sort of ending on, there was some discussion on whether CHAP had an issue with the curb cut versus the functionality of the front door, or the front garage door opening. And we did redesign our front door. If it's a matter of the aesthetics of a front-loaded garage, we didn't want to see carriage doors. I think that we've shown that we can actually design a front-loaded garage that doesn't look like a garage door. We can actually provide trim that it masks that look more like a storefront that still has the functionality. So if it's an aesthetic issue versus a function issue, I think that we can meet that criteria and provide not only a much-needed amenity from the spoon, but also to avoid unnecessary occupied space on that lowest level, considering we're trying to maintain and trying to restore as much of the historic nature of that building as we can.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner
Yeah, I have a question. So with regard to the floodplain issue and having parking on the first floor, if I'm looking at the front elevation, are you proposing that entire level as parking, or is it just the left side where the door is proposed?
The door will be on the left-hand side, so you would pull in or back in, and then, it's sort of widen out to the back of the property, and you'd be able to park, 2 to 3 cars in the back of the property. The ground floor has a modest sort of entry space with a staircase that goes directly up. So it's really more of like a landing more than anything at the front. And we would organize it in a 5-bay pattern, a center entry door, some glazing sort of storefront on the right-hand side. So you would enter in and then actually just go up a staircase to the rest of the residence.
Okay. My other question is, which elevation is actually the current proposal in the package, which Eddie, you might, so there's, on page 11, I think it is, well, in my packet anyway.
This was our latest proposal as a way to mask the aesthetic nature of the carriage door. We provided this as a discussion point. Personally, I like the carriage door opening. I mean, if it's a garage, make it a garage. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with this aesthetically. I think it's an attractive facade. We provided the second facade as a response to comments. This would be a way to hide the door.
And this one here is a roll-up door?
Yes, ma'am.
And the other one is our swing, they swing out?
Correct.
Kind of like the example?
Well, they could actually swing in, or like we probably wouldn't have them swing out just because it's,
Right.
Because of people on the sidewalk. They would probably swing in.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, other questions? Yep, Commissioner Powell?
Can you go back to that slide if you would, just 'cause it's easy? What is the first floor top of slab in the right side of this elevation?
I'm sorry, this top of slab?
What's the top of slab like?
Yeah.
I know the benchmark is 9.5, 9.5, 9 feet 6 inches is the elevation at which you have to be above.
Right, yeah, this is like 5.8. So it's just above the FEMA line, but it's not above the Baltimore City requirement, which is 4+. We just had an elevation certificate. They told us 9.4, but 9.6 is, so it's far below that elevation.
Other questions, Commissioners? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We also have signed in, did not say indicated desire to testify first, Sayed Deshima Safinia. I'm sorry that I butchered that. And then Jay Johnson. No comment. All right. And I see Mr. Prettle waving his hand.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Nate Prettle here. I was brought on as a consultant in this project at the end of last year, and I think Adam did a wonderful job of explaining really the nuances of this project and why we believe that the curb cut and the garage opening are appropriate. And I just wanted to add a couple quick thoughts. And that I think the city rightfully sets an extremely high bar for front-loading garages and new curb cuts, particularly in a historic district. When you're first looking at this, you think, there are so many steps and, sort of benchmarks that need to be met to even be considered that this would be a non-starter in almost any other case. And I think as Adam was getting at, that the factors that came into our request can almost never be replicated in the Fells Point Historic District. Not only the technical requirements of receiving DOT approval, receiving the Fells Point Design Review Committee Historic Preservation approval, the Neighborhood Association approval from the neighbors, approval from the councilman, and in my opinion, we do meet the guidelines, particularly there was the first guideline about new curb cuts. So, if possible, they should always be in the rear. Well, that I think years ago may have been an option here until the recent, and ongoing redevelopment of the adjacent property to the east, which removed the ability to access this property from the rear. All those things put together with the floodplain and without the ability to even use this first floor, I think this is really a rare circumstance where this would be appropriate in an historic district, and I would urge the commission to approve the garage front and curb cut.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Prettle? Hearing none. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to testify before the commission on this matter? Seeing none, commissioners, shall we deliberate?
Well, I guess I'll start. I, for one, have no problem with access from the street, as long as it fits all the guidelines and in terms of getting through zoning and all those directives. I know as CHAP commissioner, it is part of our purview to disallow that. But in this situation, we don't have alley access. It is extra wide, and it gives us extra reasons for it not to be a solid precedent for multiple ones. And frankly, if it's going to be a garage, I find that to be a sustainable, almost creative way to provide much needed parking in an area that we want to invest in. So I'm in favor of allowing the carriage house doors on the garage, let it be a garage, allow the curb cut, and make sure that we put in our directive, in our approval, those specific things to this property.
I'm opposed to it on multiple levels. One, you're privatizing parking, right? You're going to give somebody 2 private spots and take a spot off the street. You're going to bring street traffic, cars, vehicular traffic through the pedestrian realm in an unprotected way. You're going to have to be backing out you're either going to back in or back out, so you're going to be kind of blind and obscured by the building, and so that's creating a dangerous condition. Where this is in Fells Point, it is at that crux, and it is like it is the, you're either going to come around on the promenade, but if you were on the retail street, it's the first connection over towards Thames Point. So I think it's not a secondary street, it's a primary pedestrian connection between the two parts. I think that some of the justifications are frankly irrelevant to me. Like, you know, you could put whatever you want to down on the first floor, you just wouldn't get presumably coverage from insurance if it were damaged due to flooding. You could create a floodgate situation if you wanted to, but I don't think if by being an urban dweller, it is your right to get a parking spot. If you choose to live in a pedestrian neighborhood, you may not have a parking spot, or you may have to park remotely, and that's the trade-off to me. I don't think it's a given right, and so particularly not in these neighborhoods.
Right? Other opinions? Other discussion? We have sort of two competing ideas here. Who's first up with the motion?
I wanted to make a comment and kind of ask a question. This kind of goes to you, Eddie. So Adam Carballo showed, and in the presentation, there's precedence of buildings on that block that have garage door openings, garage fronts. I'm assuming those were all done before the district historic district.
Correct. Primarily on that block of Alisana Street, those garage entries and curb cut openings are on the south side. They existed before the district was created. The CHAP Commission did not approve any. The one building at 1922 that CHAP reviewed was an addition to an existing garage that had an existing garage and curb cut.
Right.
There is on the south side where this building is located, there is a bit of a curb depression, almost a curb cut in the granite in front of the restaurant building on that block. If I can address a couple of the other points about the building in 1923, that was a violation of construction without a permit, which the commission did review and consent agenda and approved the revisions that bring it into compliance. The other property at the other end that is currently under violation by housing for work without permits.
And my other question is, I'm not sure who knows the answer exactly, but the city's floodplain requirement, is it, and I'm not as familiar with that as I probably should be, but does it restrict occupiable in terms of residential use on that level?
Yes.
Does it restrict non-residential use? In other words, could you have retail or any or other type of use there, or, well, I guess that's the question really, right?
The non-residential portion of usage I'm not as familiar with. Considering that all the components and utilities would have to be located above the floor, above that ground level, including all receptacles and everything else, I would preclude and assume that nothing quite could be using that space.
But that's your assumption.
My assumption.
Okay.
Considering it's a 9.4.
Thank you very much. Other questions or comments? If not, someone want to throw something out on the table here.
I'll try to start with a recommendation to approve height, massing, and scale, including the front loading garage and the curb cut. And final details to be considered by full CHAP commission. And that our precedent is due to lack of alley access, floodplain, limited permitted use on the main level and with an opening allowance in this particular building.
Okay, so I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Councilman Bullock. Is there any further discussion?
So I can't have a counter motion.
We're going to vote on this, and if this does not succeed, then we'll entertain additional
I'm just
motions.
kidding.
So, what we have on the motion is based on the unique circumstances of a double wide lot, and the floodplain requirements to elevate the first floor, and there's a third element.
Lack of alley.
Oh, and lack of alley access. The motion is to approve height, massing, and scale, as well as the front-loading garage with carriage-style door. Full details to come back before the entire commission. That is the motion on the table. I'm going to call around the table one at a time for a vote of aye or nay. A vote of aye will be in support of this motion. Nay will be in opposition to it. And calling the roll, I have Commissioner Brenza.
Aye.
Commissioner Mosca.
Really torn on this one. I'm going to vote nay.
An aye and a nay. Commissioner Edwards.
The two I'm torn. I'll vote nay.
Nay. Councilman Bullock.
I'll agree it's a tough one, but aye.
Aye. Councilman.
Nay.
Commissioner Bell. Commissioner Mahan.
I'm going to vote aye, and the reasoning really, the compelling argument to me is the floodplain issue. I feel like floodplain, flooding in historic districts, the more we can do to kind of continue use in these areas, the better. I don't know if the garage is the best use possible, but I'm going to say aye on this one.
I agree. Resiliency is important, and we have to be adaptive to achieve it. I do not think that this is the right adaptation.
All right, we have a tie vote. The chair votes nay. With that, I will basically kick this into the next commission to let them to try and figure out a way around this. With that, motion fails. Next item is then 1500 Bolton Street in the Bolton Historic District. Proposal is to paint a brick front facade and install shutters. Applicant is Christopher Heller. Staff reviewer is Anthony Stewart. Thanks, guys.
We didn't want you to go out with a bang.
I know.
Seriously.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is 1500 Bolton. Bolton Hill retains a strong Victorian era traditional row house character with relative intact blocks of structures in the middle to the 19th century. Residential community encompasses approximately 170 acres.
Anthony, can you drop your mask for this because we can't hear them?
We can't
Okay,
understand
sorry.
what you're saying. I'm sorry.
I apologize. Would you like me to start over? That'd be all right?
Please.
Bolton history basically retains a strong Victorian era traditional row house character with a relative intact blocks of structure from the middle to the late 19th century. The residential community encompasses approximately 170 acres in the central northwest section of the city. The row house building type predominates Bolton Hill has treated a variety of ways. The later treatments include the use of stone for the facade, carved stone or more elaborate brickwork around the openings and small ornament iron balconies at the first floors. In the 1960 development, Bolton Hill adapts the characters row houses from a modernist ideal. Excuse me. I'm trying to wear a mask today. So this is an aerial view of 1500. This is kind of the front side elevation of Bolton Street. The property is located on the northwest corner of Bolton and Morsher Street. Is a 3-story, 3-bay end of group Italianate brick row homes with a first story storefront. The floor consists of awnings, shutters, and the second floor consists of front facade is an unpainted brick with double hung 6/6 windows. The building covers the whole lot of Morsher Street, the alley, and 5 bay garage facing Mercer Street side elevation, which is painted as you can see here. The second story also has awnings, and as you see, it's currently, the side is painted, but the front isn't painted. This is another close-up of the front elevation. This is the side. So a little background. CHAP files for this property document work on the property over the decades, largely maintained and repaired in nature. Relevant to this proposal are two applications in the 2000s. CHAP staff approved an application to remove the paint from the facade of the building and repoint mortar joints. In 2007, the application was approved to paint exterior brick walls and wooden frame, except for the elevation meeting the front. So, based on CHAP records and photographic documentation, the facade of the building has been unpainted for majority of its history. A 1940s photograph from Frank Silver's book, Bolton Hill Classic Baltimore Neighborhood, shows the front of the building was unpainted brick, which you can see in the middle on the middle photograph on page 164, which is here. You can see at the bottom here that the brick is clearly unpainted. The front facade was painted sometime between 1956 and 1988 when the property was known as the London Shop, owned by Bill. I cannot pronounce his. Thank you very much. There are no records of this building being painted. So if it was done before Bolton Hill was a local district, or it was painted without CHAP approval. The proposal for this property is to paint the front brick facade and install shutters on the front facade, and they will match the existing on the side. The application states that the painting of the brick will provide a cohesive look for the property and achieve our goal of bringing the property back to what it historically has been. So CHAP applied guidelines. There you go. Excuse me, sorry, I'm trying to keep up with myself. CHAP applied guidelines 1.10.3 masonry painting. Masonry that has never historically been painted should not be painted. Repaint previously painted masonry to match existing color or choose historically appropriate colors. In this building's history, document evidence shows that the facade was unpainted in the 1940s and painted sometimes in the 1970s, and the paint was removed in the 2000s. Baltimore City Historic Preservation Design Guidelines state that masonry that has never historically been painted should not be painted. While the facade brick of the building has been painted for a few decades in the late 20th century, the paint has since been removed, and the brick facade is in good condition and should not be repainted. Staff also applied 1.7.1 and 1.7 alteration of additions. The applicant would like to install shutters on the facade of 1500 Bolton Street. Staff applied these guidelines because there is no evidence to reconstruct shutters on the front. There's no physical documentation or any evidence that the building had shutters on the beginning, even though there are shutters on the side, but never on the front. So analysis, the staff finds the painting of unpainted brick of the facade does not comply with design guidelines. While the facade brick was painted a few decades, again, it's unpainted now. While soft brick was sometimes painted to improve its appearance and durability during painting, highly fired facade bricks were not typically practiced historically. Staff thus finds that the request to paint the brick does not comply with the guidelines. So the recommendation is to disapprove.
That's for both the painting and the shutters, correct?
Correct.
All right. Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions for Anthony? Hearing none. I have two people signed in indicating they wish to testify. First of all, Christopher Huer, who's the owner. Feel free to come up.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Good to be back. Al Barry, AB Associates, along with Chris Heller, the applicant. I've been working with Chris for over a year to find the right building in Baltimore that he could put his business in that had the right zoning. So we found this building, and I found out recently that he had to come before CHAP to get approval to repaint the front facade. And I want to just mention a few things before I let Chris talk further about his reasoning for this. As the commissioners know, guidelines are guidelines. I think one could read into the guidelines the fact that this is essentially repainting what was a painted facade. It may not have been original, but it was painted for many years. So I think that's why you have a commission to sort of interpret this on a case-by-case basis. I also want to say that if you look at the slides, it's quite evident just from a design perspective. Forget the guidelines, just from an aesthetic perspective. This is a corner building. Most corner buildings in Baltimore, if not Bolton Hill, certainly have a unified appearance, whether it's all brick or as opposed to this three-way. You know, we got a storefront that wraps around. We have a painted wall. It goes all the way down the street. We have this brick, which is actually sort of an anomaly on that block. If you go back to the slide, it's a stone-faced block. So the brick sort of stands out in a way that I think a more formal corner approach to the whole building would be probably much more aesthetically in keeping. The last thing I'll say is that there's certainly examples in Baltimore, iconic examples like the Hackney House, where paint is not an unusual treatment in a historic district. You have Castell Road, 26th Street. You had 1200 block of John Street. Very nice painted facades. And finally, your own Sarah Ann Historic District. If you looked at those buildings, they're painted. Now, you didn't approve it yet, but I do think paint in and of itself should not be sole criteria to not allow it. In this case, we think we have an argument that it was previously painted. It'll look better. It'll improve the whole building. And with that, I'll let Mr. Heller just explain briefly his design approach and what he wants to use the building for.
Thank you all. And thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time for letting me share with you kind of my thoughts. So just some background. So my husband and I purchased this building, as Al mentioned, late last year. We moved in 19 from South Florida, where we have a design and branding studio for almost 20 years. And we were looking, as Al mentioned, for the appropriate place to have our Baltimore location, and that's when we found this property. In going through, obviously from a brand and design standpoint, our goal from the very start was to paint the front facade, understanding that it would unify a cohesive look from the front as well as the side. Just some additional background. So I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. My grandparents lived in Bolton Hill. So my love for architecture, my love for design has roots within this community, which is, especially why I was so happy to find a property such as this that is in the neighborhood, and we're able to now plant roots here. In going through I know you guys have already seen it, but we found a historic photo that shows when it was the London shop and it was painted, as well as an additional photograph of another time when it was painted another color. We understand that it wasn't historically painted. However, if you look through both of these periods, and as Al mentioned, if you look at the corners of most of the properties within Bolton Hill, the exception to the rule is 1500 Bolton. The only other property that is not painted is one at the other end, but you'll see, our property has no paint in the front. The other commercial property is painted both on the front and the side, and this is the pharmacy on Park Avenue. And this is the only other building in Bolton Hill that has painted on the side and not on the front. And you can see there's not a cohesive, appearance to the property. But if you look at every other property and every other corner, all of the properties are cohesive in the sense that they're brick. And that's why we feel that it's appropriate to approve the painting of the facade so that we can go back to a cohesive look, going back to how it had been, not originally, but how it had been historically painted. And I know in speaking at length with Eric, and I'm not going to go through all these, but you're welcome to take a look. in speaking with Eric and also Anthony at length, and I appreciate both of your time leading up to this hearing, I know one of the concerns was that painting could hurt the brick. And so I have documentation from Sherwin-Williams stating that not only does the application and the type of paint and primer that we want to use, not only it not only secures but also ensures that the brick will not be deteriorated as a result. It actually preserves the brick. So both the Loxon primer, sealer, acrylic coating specifically engineered for interior and exterior above-grade masonry brick surfaces requiring high-performance primer. It is highly alkaline in effervescence resistant. It is designed to protect masonry and brick surfaces from environmental elements to eliminate any degrading of the brick or masonry. So I understand, obviously, that not only the Mosher side, but also the alley side, the entire, all other sides of this property and the courtyard are already painted. I understand that that's going to be something that I need to maintain. I also understand that painting the facade is something that I'm going to have to maintain. My thought and approach is that unifying and painting the front facade allows it, again, to all be cohesive. I also have letters of support. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Cookhouse directly across the street, but this is the letter that they shared with me. This letter's intent is to express the support of Christopher and Ryan Heller's request to paint the front facade of 1500 Bolton Street, our neighbor directly across the street from Cookhouse. They have already begun making many wonderful changes to the property and know their enhancements will only further beautify the corner, and their presence will be a great addition to our community. As a realtor in Bolton Hill and familiarity within the guidelines, there is no reason this request should be denied, nor should they have had to go to the lengths that they have for this approval. Their historical photos support the cohesive look of the front facade being painted. The following taken from the guidelines supports this. 110.3. Masonry that has never historically been painted should not be painted. This property was previously painted as evidence shows. Repaint previously painted masonry should match existing color or choose a new historically appropriate color, which they have also planned to do, and it will only further support their complete plan to restore the property and its historic appearance. And to that effect, I wanted to also mention that in addition to painting the facade, our goal is to bring the building back to its historic nature. So I know at some point the carriage houses were converted from original carriage house doors with the garage being lowered about 3 feet and roll-up garage doors being put on. We already have received approval from CHAP to take off the garage doors and to reinstall carriage house doors, as well as putting on. So our goal with the shutters to the front is to unify and cohesively bring the building back. So the idea of, the shutters are on the side, and the shutters and awnings that have already been approved for the front would further, bring a cohesive look to the property. In this, I have the documentation from the guidelines that I've already quoted, but it's outlining 110.3, masonry that has never historically been painted, should not be painted, however, this had already been painted, and then the message about the color, obviously, that we would be doing from a historic nature.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do I have questions for Mr. Heller?
Yeah, I have a question. Regarding the cohesiveness of the building, did you consider removing the paint from the other sides that have paint on them?
So I would prefer not going that route. And I say that because as much as I love historic brick. I love the historic look of Bolton Hill. However, the brick facade currently is a very red brick. It's not, if you look at the photographs that I've shared of all the other corners, they're more of an orange. They're a nicer, to me, aesthetically as a designer, they're So for me, I would prefer to paint the front facade versus going through the extensive expense of taking the paint off of literally every other surface of the property.
Okay. Are you working with an architect, or are you doing this? Are you exploring these ideas without an architect?
Correct.
Okay.
Just with my design background.
There was a lot of kind of statements that were made that seemed to be kind of absolutes that I think I'm uncomfortable with. So it seems to me that it's very typical in Bolton Hill and in other historic construction. We have this in Mount Vernon. We just went over this issue actually on a big project in Mount Vernon. The secondary facades are very often made with a cheaper brick. Sometimes they were stuccoed, and sometimes they were painted, and sometimes they're just left to be secondary after, a 2-foot return. And I was Google mapping around Bolton Hill, and I would say that a lot of the other properties actually, if they painted the secondary facade, they painted it red. And so I'm not suggesting you do that. I'm just saying that that kind of masks the fact that lots of the secondary facades are in fact painted, and it is the majority of the secondary facades are of a kind of a second tier of brick. So that's a challenging piece to me of this story. Is we know that you have a kind of a really finished brick on the facade, which historically would not have been painted. And there is not a lot of precedent for shutters on the primary facades in Bolton Hill either.
So I don't know if this.
I was hoping you had some.
Yeah, so this should be in the presentation that you all have, but it does show that this is not our property, but this is obviously other properties within. This is on Lafayette Street.
Yeah.
Had shutters in the front, and my understanding is that because of the cost of maintaining shutters, over time they've been removed just because of the expense.
Something you would find frequently in houses like this, especially in Bolton Hill, are interior shutters. Is there any of the original interior left that would have sort of these, pocketed shutters that would flip out on the inside?
So haven't seen any evidence of interior shutters, and I think I think because of this being a commercial, it was originally retail since the start of this property. My assumption is that those interior shutters were never part of this property.
Okay, thank you.
I actually went to visit the site, and everything that Anne pointed out is indeed applicable to this site. The facade brick is a relatively high-fired, high-quality brick, laid up, beautifully laid up, with very narrow mortar joints. The side elevation is clearly a softer brick, wasn't nearly as well finished, and laid up with wider mortar joints, and may have been painted originally, but there are other houses in Bolton Hill, in the immediate area, where it's just the bare, less finished brick that is left exposed. The other thing I'll point out is that there were never shutters on this particular house. There's no evidence of any pintles or pintle marks where they would have been stuck into the brick facade. So I would approve our recommendations.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Heller? Hearing none, thank you very much, sir. We also have Susan Van Buren signed up.
Good afternoon, commissioners. It's been a long time, and it's really nice to put a face to Anthony Stewart after months of email exchanges. My name is Susan Van Buren, and I am the chair of the Architectural Review Committee, which is a standing committee of the Bolton Hill Community Association. In the spirit of full disclosure and transparency, you should know that my husband Peter and I owned 1500 Bolton Street for 30 years, from 1988 to 2018. We have met with Christopher and Ryan on a number of occasions to brief them on the joys of taking care of this big, beautiful house. And we sincerely appreciate their commitment to taking good care of it and trying to respect its histories. Members of the Architectural Review Committee reviewed and commented on the proposal to add shutters and to paint the front of the building. Since we just received the application 2 weeks ago, we did not have a chance to meet in person and discuss this with Christopher Ryan, which would have certainly been our preference. With regard to the shutters, there were no objections, as long as the requirements for physical, photographic, or historic evidence of prior shutters on this specific building could be provided in accordance with the CHAP design guidelines on page 22. New shutters would have to be wood and would have to be attached with proper historic hardware, again, in accordance with the design guidelines. With regard to painting the facade, the ARC was unanimous, -1, in agreeing that this is not consistent with the CHAP design guidelines. The photographs on page 164 of Frank Shiver's book, incorrectly labeled 1940s when they're actually 1904 and 1907, clearly show an unpainted facade. This would have been typical in Bolton Hill, where the facades are higher quality hard brick with butter joints, not soft brick requiring paint for protection, as in some other older neighborhoods. The photograph of 1500 Bolton Street that shows a painted facade that was included in the application for reference is the London shop. And that's what it looked like when we bought the property in 1988. It was our understanding that the house had been painted by Bill Fazenfeld as part of a major renovation that he did to the property, turning it from particularly the upper floors, decrepit single-room occupancy to elegant apartments on the second and third floors, and his antiques business on the first floor. With CHAP approval, my husband and I had the paint removed from the facade in 2000, 2001, in order to return it to its original unpainted condition. The ARC was also concerned about setting a precedent for painting any unpainted brick in the neighborhood. I want to address just a couple of points that Christopher and Al brought up. With regard to the cohesiveness of the building, in the early 90s, of the 4 corners at Bolton and Mosher, 3 out of the 4 had brick facades, had painted sides. And one of those was China Terrell's. She removed the paint from the side of her house for lead reasons shortly after she purchased it. The house directly across the street from her at the other corner had the paint removed because of leakage on the mortar joints that was causing mold on the inside of the plaster, and the plaster was failing. In 1992, it cost him $55,000 to strip and repoint that wall. With regard to aesthetics, we received nothing but appreciation and compliments when we stripped the front of the building. The building was home to Pentagram, which is an internationally regarded graphic design firm, for 5 years, and they really liked it and thought that it was beautiful. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer, but thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Van Buren? Hearing none, thank you very much. That concludes the people who have signed in wishing to testify. Is there anyone else in the audience? Ms. Terrell, please come up. Once again, state your name for the record, if you could, please.
Hello, everyone. Again, I'm China Terrell, CHINATERRELL. So I am the neighbor to Chris. I live at 1424 Bolton Street. So when my husband and I wake up on, wake up in our bedroom. Well, it's very dark usually, but because I wake up super early. But when we do wake up, and it's later, if it's ever later, I look at Chris's house, and I want to say that I am here to say that I'm very supportive of what he's trying to do. As I mentioned before, I'm a lawyer. I gave you that background, and so to me, this is very simple. We don't have to overthink it. The facade had been painted before, period. Which means that the rule that you can't paint something that hadn't been painted before to me shouldn't apply because it had been painted before. And so yes, we removed the paint on the side of our house because we have a 5-year-old and lead paint, and she plays and runs on that sidewalk and so forth. At the same time, I do think it looks a lot better painted, and it always was very weird to me that the entire house was not the same color. And I'm so glad that Chris is thinking about putting back the actual carriage doors. That would be completely amazing. It sounds like he loves historic preservation. So all of us in this room are absolutely kindred spirits. Now, when I was in law school, not only did I learn that contracts are made to be broken, but I also learned that in property law, it's not, you can't really come back and kind of control things like from the grave. And so now that the house is sold, I don't know, to me, it's a bit of a conflict of interest potentially that someone would be able to say, well, this is how we did it when we lived there, so the house should still be that way. Or another designer liked it, and so therefore another designer can't have a different opinion about it. So I just think that we have to manage the conflicts of interest. So I'm a neighbor, and then I know that I also rent a garage in Chris's house as well because he has multiple garages. But I think that it's absolutely perfect and wonderful and honoring of the historic intention of the neighborhood and the historic goals for there to be shutters because there are other houses in the neighborhood that have shutters on the front. And so the idea that this specific house has to have had a photograph where that particular house had shutters, that's a little bit odd because maybe if there are other houses that are corner houses like this that had shutters before, that would be okay. But I'm absolutely supportive of his being able to paint the facade because it would seem to me that the rule that that you can't paint it if it had never been painted before doesn't apply since it in fact had been painted before. And of course, there are all kinds of ways, lime wash, any kind of a thing, to do it in a proper way that honors the brick. But I don't, if I didn't have a 5-year-old daughter and didn't have the lead paint issues, then I would agree that the house should be uniform and the whole thing should be painted, and we would have repainted the side of our house. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from Mr. L? Hearing none. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to testify before the commission on this matter? Seeing none, commissioners, shall we deliberate?
Sure. I have one point that I wanted to make in clarification to something that was just said. So I understood that Susan Van Buren was here representing the ARC. And so the fact that there was anecdotal talk brought into that, the truth is what I heard clearly was the ARC was in favor of adding the shutters if they could prove that they had in fact been there, if they installed them as wooden shutters and installed them per historically appropriate shutter installation with hardware. So that was the first point that was clearly outlined, although I have heard that there is no evidence of it previously having historic shutters, which from my experience, you can usually tell if there were shutters or not. And then the other second part was that they did not, that the ARC did not approve painting the primary facade, which was of a high quality brick with a thin mortar joint. So I want to make sure we all have that right. That here is the ARC, and that the ARC did not support.
That was our understanding.
I'd like to make a motion to approve staff recommendation.
A motion for staff recommendation, which is to disapprove the painting of the front facade and the installation of shutters. Do I have a second? And then there might be special commentary. I have a second from Mr. Mosca. Would you accept the friendly amendment of the council that if it can be proven that there were shutters historically, that they would be entertained, have to bring that evidence back to staff?
Absolutely.
Yes.
A motion, I have a second, I have an approval of friendly amendment. Is there any further discussion?
I would just like to add that while I definitely agree that two-tone is not as cohesive a look, there's an opportunity here to paint the side a color that would be closer to match. If the front weren't so beautiful, after all that work of pulling the paint off, that would be a different story, I think. But in this case, you know, I definitely would want to preserve that front brick. But in order to you know, to bring that cohesive into the building like you want to do, I think that, you know, there's an opportunity to paint towards that red. Maybe not exactly that matte red if you don't like that specific color, but something that would be compatible.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor of approving the staff recommendation for denial of painting at shutters unless the shutters can be shown to be there historically, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
I have one nay, Councilman Bullock. All right, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on, we have just two more items. We have 1128 to 1130 North Calvert Street in the Mount Vernon Historic District. Proposal to remove stained glass windows from rear elevation. Applicant is Irene Askew, 1130 Calvert Investors LLC, and Anthony will be our staff presenter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that first one pushed it into a different time there.
Anthony, if you could make sure
Yes, I will.
clearly into the.
Thank you. Okay. So this property is the site of 1120, 1130 North Calvert Street. Is located within Mount Vernon Historical District, which encompasses roughly 40 blocks surrounding the Mount Vernon place. The contributing buildings within this district include a diversity of styles, buildings types, including masonry apartments, office, religious structures, and period centers. Mount Vernon is from 1810 to 1945. This is an aerial street view of, whoops, I apologize. I went backwards.
It is one of mine too.
Yeah, this is the front elevation of 1128. This is the side or front elevation. Sorry, excuse me. Give me a second. All right. The existing property is a 3-story end of group Italianate style brick building with brownstone details, with a 2-story rear carriage house located in the southwest corner of North Calvert Street and East Bill Street. The side of North Calvert Street and the north side elevation of the main house around the carriage house is East Bill Street. The rear of the building minimally visible from East Bill Street. So this is the side elevation here, front kind of side elevation. This is a full on side, and this is the rear, which we are discussing today. So background, the Gilded Age Mansion of the southwest corner of Calvert and Biddle Street. It was built in 1891 for Theodore Hopper of the Hopper family. Architect Charles Carlson and founder of the Baltimore chapter of the American Institute of Architects designed the home. Theodore Harper died in September 1906, and his home was sold to Richard White, and that family lived in the home for 11 years. And they moved out. In 1128, James Clark Murphy, who sold the property to the Society of the St. Joseph of the Sacred Heart in 1929, Joseph Fice worked out of 1128 North Calvert Street for 87 years, and the order moved out of 1128 in 2016. The proposal is applicant would like to remove these 3 stained glass windows from the rear, and to, oops, sorry, yeah, these windows here, as you can see from an interior view, to they are currently doing a tax credit for the rehabilitation of this whole property, which meet most of the guidelines that said the removal of these windows. They would like to replace them with vinyl windows as a part of the rehabilitation of this property, creating dwelling units. These windows are also non-operable and fixed windows, and in order to meet the guidelines, they require them to be removed. Staff applied, and oh, I'm sorry, this is just added. Their proposal is to remove the windows and add them to the courtyard onto floating walls here, as you can see, and over a planter box. Staff applied 1.7 windows. The removal of the rear windows do not meet the guidelines that they categorize as special windows. They are custom designed or created and installed during a period of significance in Mount Vernon Historical District, in the Society of Joseph, during the time of the Society of Joseph the Sacred Heart only building from 1929 to 2016. There are actually no neighborhood comments from Vernon at this time, but I do have one letter from one who just actually left, Linda Weber, who's an associate research professor from anthropology at the University of Maryland. Her letter was also on the Wix site, and basically her idea is that she would like the windows to be at least donated to a place where they can be seen at a more appropriate level for the public. The analysis that the applicant proposing to remove the stained glass windows do not meet the guidelines. These windows fall in the category of special windows and need to be preserved. A redesign may need to take place to accommodate the egress from this unit of jurisdiction or have a reason to remove all three windows. Suggestion that the bottom sash be removed and turned to a harbor window to make the windows more appropriate for development. Recommendation is to disapprove the removal of these three stained glass windows and replace them with vinyl windows.
All right. Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions for Anthony?
I have a question about what we have on the Wix site, because there's the staff report, but there was also the authorization to proceed, which talks about additional windows. But right now, we're just looking at.
We're just focused on this one, but that report included the proposal that they had just sent to me on the 7th. So I added that in.
Okay, all right, thanks.
No problem.
Other questions?
So I understand that the Mount Vernon Historic District's period of significance is quite broad. But then we know, of course, that this was a residential house and that these windows were added by the Society of St. Joseph of the Sacred Heart. And so therefore, in 1929, which was, 23 years after the house was built, not 1891, so whatever, 30-something years later. So I'm not clear, can somebody help me understand why these windows would be protected when the house itself was built 30+ years before?
Well, the Secretary of Interior's guidance states that, additions or renovations can't achieve their own level of significance if basically they've been there long enough. So just because it's not original does not mean that it's not achieved historic character.
Okay. I can believe that. No, okay, so you're not lying. No, but, and I think that I too understand that from a professional perspective. But in this case, who is to establish that these stained glass windows are in fact
I believe that's our responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's why I get the big pay.
It was a delicious sandwich.
It's a joke, yes.
So, yeah, okay. All right, that was it. I just wanted to get clarity around that.
If you allow me, I think, as you look at the many layered histories that we have of all properties in Baltimore City, the question is, was the St. Joseph's tenure there, was that significant? And were the changes that was done to it significant? And I would say yes. I would also say that if you look at Mount Vernon, the historic development pattern of that community went from upper class residential housing, and then after 1904, the fire, you start to get more of a mixed use of those houses, and people start moving on generations start moving out to Roland Park or the Green Spring Valley.
I mean, I'm familiar with the property. I've spent time in this building, so, you know, I think this for me, that, I think that you know, the point is still that it feels very much like the house that it was built to be in 1891, and that feels like the thing you want to be true to, but we can talk about that during deliberations.
So we have 3 people who signed in, one of which indicated a desire to testify, and that would be Linda Rabin.
Oh, that's the letter. She just.
Well, in that case, I also have Irene Askew, who's the applicant. You're welcome to come and address the commission if you want.
Thank you so much for allowing me to speak to you today. This building, as you all know, was built in the late 1800s and sold to the Josephites, I think it was 1926. They moved out in 2016 and it had remained vacant for all these years. It was also on the market for many years. Nobody wanted to buy it. So we sold the building, we fell in love with everything about it, including the windows. Now, the question is, you know, when trying to restore this property, taking everything in consideration, and that includes safety for its occupants, that's where the issue with the window comes into place. And we had a meeting with housing and the fire marshal, and that particular room, which was basically something done by the church to satisfy the needs of having a chapel inside of this building. Basically, I mean, it's not safe for anybody. It wasn't even safe for them before, when you can't actually exit through the window in case of a fire. So that's why we're making this request. It's more of a safety issue. I did reach out to several churches. I know there was a comment of, I think, a recommendation to donate them, which will be, you know, I mean, I think it would be great. We love the history of the time. Like I said, we love everything about the building. We've worked very closely with CHAP, and we are preserving everything. I mean, the floors, the woodwork, the handrail, everything. So, but this, to me, and to the fire marshal, is an issue of safety. So no one had reached out, at least the churches that I reached, including the Josephites, wanted to do anything with them. The father for the Josephites literally told me, you can dispose of them, you can throw them away, which we don't really want to do. And that's when, talking to the architect and a designer, we decided, well, let's incorporate that into the foyer, so it also can give the resident a little bit of a story about the building. So we will be okay with either scenario, either keep them in place, perhaps even inside of the building, in hallways or corridors or something like that, being, you know, very creative, or in the corridor. But, you know, like I said before, to me it's an issue of safety. These windows are stained glass, or, you know, they have a very small opening with a hinge. No one can get out of there. And they're located in the rear of property, barely visible from the street. Like I said, I think the initial idea for the Josephites was to, you know, have their chapel in. And that particular room, it's the only one that looks this way. So, you know, just hope that you guys consider my statement today.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Askew?
Yeah, I have a question. So has your architect studied alternatives for egress from that room? I'm guessing you want to use it as a sleeping room, and that's why you need to have the egress requirements for the windows, right?
Correct.
Have you looked at other configurations that will, you know, allow some alternatives, essentially, either removing one of the windows or not all three, or, not using it for sleeping, or just, options basically.
I guess we didn't consider just removing one. I would assume the fire marshal will probably allow that. It will still look a little bit odd on the inside, perhaps.
Brexit, yes, potentially.
But we're
Feel like
trying really to
Centrino.
keep the footprint of the system building, everything the way it is. These were the Josephines, I guess, living quarters. And so we're keeping them that way. And this particular room basically will remain as a studio apartment. So we're not knocking down any walls or anything like we would have to if, let's say, we wanted to make another means of egress and converting this into part of the front yard next to it. So I guess that's where the need for a means of egress comes into place for that area. And I think the drawings are probably in your
Yeah.
plans.
Yeah, no, I'm curious why all three need to be removed personally, but I don't know the details of. Generally there's one. I think you need to have one window you can egress out of, depending on how many people are in there. But that's something that I'm assuming your architect has studied. But if not, that's something they could study potentially.
Just another one.
Yeah, I don't know if that's if that's better. Removing one is better than removing three potentially. Yes, it wouldn't look as coherent or consistent, but
Right.
something to consider possibly.
So, in my opinion, I get what you're saying, and that could be a solution. I would assume the fire marshal, at least one of the windows, it's operable, it will be okay. But I personally think that from a cosmetic standpoint, from the outside, it will be actually more notorious than it is right now. To see two windows, the same, and then one window off. I don't know. That would be something for you guys to decide.
You could sell it where the two remaining windows are an amenity because they're so special, right?
I'm sorry.
The two remaining windows would be an amenity because they're unique, right? I don't know, just throwing out ideas here.
They're also different because there's one of the windows that is perhaps 2/3 height, and they had, I don't know, maybe some paneling or something to put air conditioning in it. So the air conditioning will have to be removed anyways.
Is that the middle window or the side?
I think that's one of the sides. The right side, you will see that it's kind of shorter.
Yeah, nice balanced composition.
Right.
Right, that would be, yes.
Yeah, and if you look at the rest of the windows, even though the original structure was from the 1800s, the windows on the rest of the building are not at all. Actually, they're in pretty good condition. So at some point, they will probably be replaced. I don't know exactly when, but there's over 80 windows in this building, and these are, I guess, a major consideration because of the safety concerns.
Right. Any other questions for Ms. Askew?
No, thank you.
I have a comment. I'm wondering, could those windows be set into casement frames that would fill up the whole window opening and then could be operable by opening in, so that you retain the window in its place and
I'm sure there's an infinite number of possibilities. Yes.
yeah, there are lots of things that could be done. It seems.
Yeah, I would think a custom window fabricator
Yeah,
could do that.
exactly. Custom.
It probably wouldn't be inexpensive, but it could be done, I would think.
All right. Other thoughts? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have no one else who signed in wishing to testify. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to testify on this matter? Hearing none. All right, commissioners, what do we think?
I have a question. It says they were installed during the period of significance. Do we know? But I didn't see exactly when they were installed. They owned it from 1929 to 2018. That's a long time.
Do we actually know that they were installed before 1945?
Anthony, do you know when they were?
No, I do not know when they were actually installed.
Given their style, they're not current and modern. They don't appear to be. So probably pre-World War II would be a conjecture, but that would be just conjecture.
Okay.
Go ahead.
There is also another issue, and that is replace them with vinyl windows.
That's another. If we still have anything that would be replaced with, would have to comply with CHAP guidelines, which is, we have a whole section on windows they would need to comply with.
I'm assuming we're only talking about this stuff today, stained glass windows.
Plus, we can get some guidance on moves forward from here.
Because the recommendation does include the vinyl windows in that.
And we will,
I think we should
if we
change that.
think that's appropriate, we will correct that. I would also have one thing too, is that we do have the one window is not intact with the air conditioner in there. So that's going to come out anyway. What you put back in its place becomes a question. And I do think there might be some options to, it's not all or nothing decision. You take out the two flanking windows, leave the center one as a magnificent piece and have two glass, or take the middle glass out. I mean, there's other ways that we can acknowledge the history here and still give egress and also, quite frankly, a view. I mean, if it's going to be a residential unit, not being able to see out's probably not ideal, I would think. But I do think there's a couple different ways to be creative and solve that. I'd also offer that I don't know that placing a stained glass window outside on its own is a great idea either, because the inside was not designed to weather, so it will probably not survive long term. But I absolutely applaud the notion of trying to preserve the windows somewhere. Would be a great idea. But with that, what else do we think, guys?
So I have another question. So this property is not on the individual registry or anything. So therefore, the only purview that we have is the exterior because it's in the district.
I believe that's right.
That's in the district.
Just, they're going for the city's historic tax credit too, if that was wrong.
The CHAP credit? Do we know if if they're going for any of the NHT tax credits or federal tax credits?
Other thoughts? Motions?
I will say that since the building was not designed with stained glass, I would not be opposed to allowing these stained glass windows to be replaced with good solid windows that match our CHAP guidelines. I do commend the fact that try and find a home for these stained glass if you can. Again, I've been involved with a few different churches where they've welcomed, during an addition, they've welcomed new stained glass. So there may be somebody out there, but I would not be opposed to having these windows replaced with
conventional double hung windows.
So a motion to approve the removal and replacement with an appropriately CHAP approved window. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Powell. Is there any further discussion? I would just offer the observation that potentially trying to retain one or two of them would not be a bad thing. So you're not prohibited from doing that if that makes sense from a design standpoint. If you want to remove all three per this, that would be allowed as well. There appears to be no further discussion. Therefore, all those in favor of approval of the removal of the windows, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And abstain. All right. Motion to approve the removal carries. And our last item of today is...
And replace with wood windows. Yeah.
Well, I said replace with...
Double hung wood windows.
With approvable,
Approvable.
windows
profiles
that meet the CHAP
and
guidelines.
materials.
Do a lot of front-end materials here and there. Our last item is 837 Brinkwood Road in the Hunting Ridge Historic District. Proposal is an economic hardship to retroactively approve windows on the side and rear elevations. Applicant is Bay Homes, and staff presenter is Tyreek Charlius.
It's Baye Home.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll have to rely on this.
All right. Thank you, commissioners, for having me. Good evening, everyone. The request today is for an economic hardship to retroactively approve 27 windows on the side and rear elevations. The address is 837 Brinkwood Road in Hunting Ridge. The applicant is Baye Homes, and I, Tyreek Charlotte, am the staff member. All right. Here's a city view map of the Hunting Ridge vicinity map. Here is the actual site where the 8 starts. That's it, where the building is, the rectangular building. Even though they're all rectangular. Here's the Sanborn maps in 1928 showing the structure and the development happening in the neighborhood. And you can see the front porch illustrated there also. Here is the 1914 to 1951 map. There's a few additional houses added to the map. And here's the 1914-1953 map, where you can also see a few additional properties added to the block and the site. Here's a top aerial view of the current site and the current property. Here's the view from the south. Here's the view from the west. Here, this is another view from the south. This is another aerial view from the east. Okay, awesome. So here are the images of what the windows did look like before April 8th, of the vinyl windows that were installed at 27 locations. This is showing the left side facade. Here's photos of 4/1 double hung wood windows replaced without CHAP approval with 1/1 vinyl windows. These windows were retained. Here's an image of the windows and the work done on the right facade. So yes, on the right facade, which is actually the east facade. So where the 6/1 double hung wood windows were replaced without CHAP approval. All right, here's another view showing the rear and the left side facade, where 6/1 double hung windows were replaced without CHAP approval with 1/1 vinyl windows. Here's an original image of the rear facade with the 6/1 windows in 6 locations. And here's a photo of the 4/1 double hung wood windows that were at the attic space before renovations. So as far as background, cool. So as far as background, this property has been a property that has been an issue for Hunting Ridge for an issue. There's been a lot of turnover. The property has switched hands multiple times. And it was always historically a rental property. So these just show the recent violations from previous owners. In regards to this property owner, in February 15th, 2022, 27 historic windows were replaced with 1/1 vinyl windows, and CHAP was made aware of this by the community. The building inspector's office was contacted. The applicant did not know stated that they did not know that this was in a CHAP historic district. Therefore, the very next day, they did reach out to me and how to be in compliance with CHAP's design guidelines. On the 28th, the applicant requested to appear before the commission It is considered a code enforcement issue, and it had to be rectified by the installation of proper windows that fits CHAP's design guidelines. The owner was emailed this determination. Within that 2-week span, we was working with the applicant and the neighborhood's ARC to find a solution that could basically help all parties. So on March 1st, that's when the stop work order was actually issued after the building inspector was contacted in 2015 for windows installed without CHAP approval and work done without a permit. So on March 22, the applicant submitted an application to proceed for an economic hardship for retroactive pre-approval for the replacement of windows. CHAP's staff shared this information with the Hunting Architectural Review Committee, and we all reviewed the submission, including the information on the origin of the windows. And CHAP's staff determined that the windows did not meet CHAP historic design guidelines. CHAP staff emailed the applicant this decision to notify him that the window did not meet the guidelines and informed him that they would have to find and install a appropriate replacement in 27 locations. All right. Despite informing, okay, so then again on March 30th, I was contacted again by the neighborhood's ARC because there was also additional work to add filler to the existing 1/1 vinyl windows that appear on the building. So I had to call the building inspector once more to have a stop work order issued again because the windows were, there was PVC vinyl filler added to every single window to fill in the gaps caused by the custom vinyl windows that were installed without CHAP approval. So, yes, so that all happened on April 7th. So the proposal, as requested, will to retain the replacement 1/1 vinyl windows at 27 locations installed at February of 2020. The applicant is requesting special consideration for the following reasons. The installation of the wood windows that replicate historic styles instead of 1/1 double hung windows has a cost to install that will place a significant economic hardship on the applicant. This entire process has caused the applicant to obtain a new full-time position.
I'm sorry, can you clarify what that means?
He had to get a job to basically continue to
Thank you. I didn't know.
to be in compliance with CHAP guidelines because there was additional work to stabilize the home.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I apologize for any confusion. The initial windows were inoperable at the moment of purchase. The applicant also feels that the window is an appropriate replacement as there are homes within the neighborhood with vinyl windows on the side facades. The applicant feels that the windows add substantial amount to the home and the wood windows will not increase the value of the home on an appraisal substantially and the quality of the windows compared to the quality of the historic windows. So he believes the windows are just as nice as historic as replacement wood windows or an in-kind replacement. The 27 windows that were removed were 24 windows. Oh my goodness. There were 24 6/1 double hung windows and 3 6-pane casement windows that are of common style in Hampton Ridge. The new windows are 1/1 double hung windows. All 27 windows do not properly fit the historic window openings. The applicant later, against all advisement, installed vinyl filler illegally to fill these spaces formed by the windows not properly fitting the historic openings. Here's 2 images showing the 6-pane window. This 6-pane window still does remain on the property, so he only replaced 3 of the 6-pane windows. Right, and here's the 1/1 vinyl window to the left that does not properly fit his historic opening. CHAP used 1.7, chapter 1.7 windows to make a determination on the guidelines if the windows fit the guidelines. Right? So here are some more examples. So here's photos of what the building looks like now to the far left image. And The two images to the right were the historic windows as they before the replacements. All right. Here's the listing of the property. In this listing, it shows that the realtor did state that the property was in the Hunting Ridge Historic District. Right. As far as the economic hardship portion, the applicant submitted an authorization to proceed for an economic hardship for the retroactive approval of the replacement windows. So the cost for the retention of the windows would be $0.00. The additional cost to replace the current 27 vinyl windows with new custom vinyl windows that properly fit the historic openings would be a total of $27,389 of an additional cost to the owner. And the cost for custom new wood windows in replacement of the current 1/1 vinyl windows that do not properly fit the historic openings would be $27,797.03. The difference would be $408.03 between the two costs for the labor and the purchase of the windows. All right. The purchase of the initial cost for the 27 windows was included in a 2 or 3K loan. So the windows have already been financed, and there's no additional funds to get additional windows. Right. Here is the quote showing the cost for the custom vinyl windows. Here is the quote for the custom wood windows. And here's the cost for the labor to demo the 27 windows and do the work to the historic openings. So, and that cost was $6,700. So this was sent to me a few days ago, actually on April 7th, showing the applicant actually fixing the 1 to 2 inch gaps that the custom windows that were initially purchased with the 203K loan. So yeah, since the windows did not properly fit the historic openings, the own applicant then later installed PVC trim on April 7th to basically secure the building because the building was open. You know, it was very raining. It was raining the last few days, and there was a lot of weather factors that the applicant was worried about in protecting the home. So that's why this would happen. Here's another example of the PVC trim added to the current custom vinyl windows to basically fill in the gaps caused by the initial windows. All right. Here's a few more photos of the 1/1 double hung windows that do not properly fit the historic openings. Here's the same photo of the 6-pane window and its 1/1 replacement. Here's the first floor's 6-pane window, 1/1 double vinyl window replacements. All right, to the left is an example of 1/1 double hung window not properly fitting the existing opening, and on the right are the 2 vinyl windows on the front facade at the attic that will be replaced with the historic 4/1 window that was retained by the applicant. Here's another example of the historic openings, historic of the windows not properly fitting the openings. Here's some more. Here are some others. All right, here's another view of the side facade after the replacements of the 6/1 wood windows. Here is a photo of the front facade. The sides once more. The right facade, where the 6/1 windows were replaced with 1/1 double hung vinyl windows. The side and rear. The original photo of the rear facade. So here is the existing photo and the historic photo. Another historic photo. Here's the listing showing that the listing did show that this building was in a historic district. Here's photos of the historic windows. So to the left, you would see the existing 6-pane window, casement wood windows that were replaced. And on the right, a 6/1 double hung window. To the left again, the 6-pane window next to the two-story fireplace, and another 6/1 wood window to the right, and another example of the 6/1 double hung windows to the left and to the right. I believe that is all. Oh, okay. As far as neighborhood comments, the Hunting Ridge Arc has reviewed this proposal, and they believe that the windows do not meet the CHAP design guidelines. Staff has also received 7 letters and or emails in disapproval for the allowance of vinyl windows on the side and rear facades. There has been no letters so far of support. The 27 windows installed in February 2022 do not match the period and style of the building. It does not duplicate the design, proportion, or arrangement of divided light grids of the previous windows or a period-appropriate window. It is not comparable with the historic character of the building or the block, and the property was constructed in 1938. Period-appropriate windows include wood composite, or aluminum-clad window-style windows. So staff, therefore, recommends the disapproval of the request to retain the windows installed without CHAP review because the windows do not meet CHAP design guidelines. Staff further recommends the installation of wood, aluminum-clad, or wood composite windows on the front and side elevations that match the historic windows that were removed. The installation of 1/1 vinyl windows at 6 locations on the rear facade. These vinyl windows should properly fit the historic openings with no filler. And thirdly, the applicant should submit these new windows to staff for review and approval before installation.
All right. Thank you very much. Commissioners, Commissioner Penza.
I have a question, Tyreek. The second bullet point, is that recommending that it's okay not to put back the 6/1 windows on that facade?
Yes. So we are allowing, yes. And we are allowing, yes, since the current windows do not properly fit the existing openings on the rear facade, we are requiring new windows to be purchased for the rear facade, but they can be 1/1 vinyl windows.
Unless we feel otherwise.
Because there is filler currently in the rear vinyl windows, which is another violation of
So
CHAP
why,
design
again,
guidelines.
sorry, why would the staff not recommend putting back windows in behind the 6/1?
Well, why not? Because typically we do approve 1/1 vinyl windows on rear facades.
Commissioner Edwards?
I'm just trying to understand, so I think when you showed some of the quotes of the work that was done, you said that it was custom, they put in custom vinyl windows that cost like $20,000 or something like that. But they were custom windows that didn't fit the openings?
Yes.
You'll
I'm not
have a
really
moment in
sure
a
of the
second.
first window,
We're
but
right now
that is
asking questions. We'll then bring everyone up.
But yes, it is to my knowledge
Okay.
that the initial windows that were purchased with the renovation loan were custom, but they did not fit. And yes.
I have 2 questions. One is, so it looks like you were able to get outside and you took photos of the existing windows. Were you able to get inside to see if, in fact, the existing windows, the ones that remain, are operable or not?
No, I was not able to actually go to the site. All of those photos were provided by the community actually trespassing on Mr. Holmes's property.
Okay. My second question is, you mentioned that for the front facade, some of the windows that were removed, actually, they retained them, they have them, and they're going to reinstall, but I assume that's not the case for the rest of the windows. Is that?
Yes, the only windows that will be returned will be the 4/1 attic windows.
Okay, because they have them.
Yes, those were retained.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, other questions? Hearing none, we're going to invite people up now. First of all, starting with, is it Baye Holmes? Please come up.
All right, good afternoon. So, Just to give you a little bit of background, as Tyreek explained, um, I purchased this home in January, late January. Unbeknownst to me, um, it was in a historic district. Well, just to give you a little background on myself, I've been a Baltimore resident for the past 20 plus years. I've owned a couple of homes all in Baltimore City, and I was aware of historic districts. Just hearing that, Fells Point, Bolton Hill, but I didn't know what that consisted of. And I've never heard of CHAP either. So up until this point, I'm very well aware of what CHAP is. When I closed on this house, my realtor, which is Paul Molino, he didn't disclose to me that this was in a historic district or what that meant as far as how it applies to the home, or what I could do and what I couldn't do. My title company as well. I have an affidavit of fact that I wanted to present and give that to everyone, just to give you a copy to make sure that that's legitimate as far as what I'm saying is the truth. Excuse me. Okay, and in reference to the 27 windows, I only replaced 25. It's not a big difference, but when you talk about these windows, it's a very costly difference. Up until this point, I'm not asking for CHAP's pity. However, I do want the CHAP commissioners to be empathetic to my situation. And the reason being is I know I'm not the only person that probably bought a home without the knowledge of it being in a CHAP district. And since it has such a heavily influence on the decisions that you make with your property, I believe that that should be disclosed to you so you can make that determination. This house, as he stated, and I haven't been a part of the community, so I wasn't sure of the history of the home, but just looking at the home, I bought it as is, and I had an understanding that it needed a lot of work. So I could understand that maybe in the past this has been a problem for the community. What I wanted to do, or what I'm doing, is I wanted to invest into this property for myself and for the neighborhood, and not to take away from it. I'm not well versed on a lot of things when it comes to the house, but I try. But I hired licensed contractors to be my experts. Um, in a situation with the windows being filled this past week, I decided to do that because they have been open for the past 2 months. So it hasn't just been rain for the past couple of days, but it's been rain for the past couple of months. And I'm having deterioration in my windows. I'm having water on the floor every time it rains. So regardless of the decision today, I had to protect my home. So let me see some other points. I wanted to point out too, throughout the community, and actually on my home, I have existing 12 vinyl windows. So when I bought the house, I thought vinyl windows would be consistent if I, filled the rest with remaining vinyl windows. I also have pictures throughout the neighborhood that has vinyl windows. Let me see, 614 Winans Way, 703 Hunting Place. And I can pass these around, or is that better to do so?
You're welcome to. I think part of it is that work that was done before it was a locally designated historic district. We had no control over it. So a lot of that work, I'm guessing, predated its designation as an historic district, or it was done without authorization.
Okay. Well, I guess just speaking from a homeowner's point of view, when you see that throughout the neighborhood, you you wouldn't think that it wouldn't have a distinction that it was any different from your next door neighbors. So I didn't find that the wood windows, although there are many wood windows throughout the neighborhood as I began to get acclimated with the community, but they're very much probably equally the same amount of vinyl windows as well. And the question that I wanted to have, just in doing my research with CHAP and trying to have an understanding of CHAP guidelines, as far as the windows themselves, I never could find a guideline that stated you couldn't have vinyl windows or the like on the side and rear elevations. It does state, from what I found, that the facade to the neighborhood has to be of original or like kind. And in my situation, I had two out of 8 windows that were wood. So um, I'm just trying to understand, me being in the situation, uh, why I would be singled out, or that's how, basically I felt in this situation. I pretty much feel like, I'm standing in a pier by myself. I have some hesitance as far as even occupying the home because I have a neighbor to my right, Mr. Tribble, who takes pictures on my property when I'm not present. And it's not of my property, it's on my property. So, that gives you a bit of uncomfortableness. I don't think I have anything. Oh, in reference to Tyreek stating that I had to get a job, it's not that I had to get a job. I had to get a second full-time job. So just to brace myself for this decision or the money that I have lost up until this point, because the other permits that are on this permit hasn't been processed. So it's no running heat in the house, and it hasn't been any running heat in the house. So, that's just me being prepared to do so. Is that a good work-life balance? Absolutely not. But at the end of the day, you have to prepare yourself for a situation of this sort.
I was just asking to clarify because the statement wasn't clear.
No, I
Okay,
understand. Yeah.
Thank you. Is that all I have? Because I think we might have a couple questions and a couple observations potentially as well. So, Commissioner Edwards, it looks like you were going to say something maybe, or?
Well, you stated that you weren't aware of it being in the CHAP local historic district, but it looked like from what we were shown that it was in either the listing or in the contract. I can't remember what it was. Was it that the contract?
The community shared with me that the listing did have if you go, yes, the
Okay,
document.
so it was in the listing.
So like I mentioned before, I was unaware of what CHAP was. So I was aware of historic districts, but I didn't understand that you have any type of limitations. And I mean, also to that fact, with the scope of work that I'm doing, I could apply for a CHAP credit, which I just learned of as well.
I think another good question too is, before you're allowed to pull a permit, if the permit system works correctly in Baltimore City, if you go to pull a permit, it gets flagged and has to go to CHAP for review prior to proceeding. So did your contractor receive a permit to do the work? Because if not, that's unauthorized.
So no, he did not receive a permit to do the work. I actually submitted the permit myself. Well, not actually myself. I actually had a friend of mine submit the permit because I was unfamiliar with the permitting process. So I submitted the permit. So CHAP didn't reach out to me. I reached out to CHAP unbeknownst that was the process. So I submitted the permit, and I had a delay of about a week in that process because they didn't recognize me as being the owner, because I guess the process of titling, I had to submit for my title company that I was actually the verified owner, and then at that point I was referred to CHAP.
And so did you apply for the permit before or after your contractor started doing the work?
It was after he started the work.
Okay. So number one, that's a knock, not necessarily on you, but on your contractor, because they should know better. If they're a licensed contractor, they should know they need to pull a permit in the city of Baltimore.
Was your contract with your contractor? Did that contract state that he was going to pull the permit?
No.
I have another question, what I asked earlier about, so under these were custom windows that you ordered?
So no, they weren't.
Okay.
Yeah, they weren't. And unbeknownst to me again, when I stated that I wanted these 25 windows replaced, I didn't ask them if they were custom or not. I just asked them, I wanted to replace 25 windows. What he purchased and what he ultimately installed is what I got. Now, learning through this process, I understand what a customized window is as far as opening to opening. But
yeah, I would think that, I think that even though maybe you can do vinyl on rear and side, they still need to fit the historic openings.
I guess the other thing I just offer as an observation is we have from time to time, unfortunately, seen other people come before us saying, hey, I didn't know. Unfortunately, the answer has usually been, we're sorry to hear that, but the ignorance of the requirements is not permission, because that would set a horrible precedent for everyone else going, hey, I didn't know. So we unfortunately have seen people from time to time come before the commission, and it's always a very difficult conversation to have, but fundamentally, it's a problem. Commissioners, other questions?
I just have one. Have you paid your contractor yet?
Yes.
There might be some grounds to have some conversations with him, certainly.
We've had discussions, but he's been paid.
Other questions of the applicant? Seeing none, thank you very much, sir.
Sure.
I have signed in next Rebecca Campany.
Yeah, can I go last? I finally got my link popped up here. Is that okay?
That's fine. I also have signed in to testify of two people who aren't signed in, who signed in but didn't indicate they want to testify. I'll call them in a second. But next we have Scott Tribble.
Here, I submitted written testimony yesterday to Mr. Holcomb. If the board
Got
has
it.
that, I don't see a need to beat a dead horse.
All right. Thank you very much. We also have Louis Bronneman.
Who's Bringman?
Bringman?
My only comment is.
If you have come up to the, we're recording for the ages here, so.
I'm Louis Bringman, and I'm a resident of the neighborhood, and I have been through the CHAP process. I know that the first thing you do when you walk through that door down there and turn right and go into that building permits office and tell them your address, they send you up here.
As they're supposed to.
That's the first thing they do. Send you upstairs to get CHAP's approval. Before the pandemic, it was relatively easy. The process is simple. If you have all the paperwork and have all the answers, the permits come, pretty quick. Ignorance of the law is no excuse. So that's my only comment.
Thank you very much.
And, I submitted some emails too. Building codes are for building codes, are to protect the property owner. Historic codes protect the neighborhood.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Mr. Bronman?
Bringman.
Sorry.
Bringman.
Thank you. Hearing none, we also then have William Wells.
No need to testify.
No need to testify. Thank you very much. And then Ms. Campany, you are.
Would you like me to bring this to you?
Yeah, let's do that.
It's not.
Special dispensation.
I just would like to say, first of all, I feel terrible for you in the position you're in, IA. The neighborhood, I think at some point, CHAP said, okay, well, we'll fine him. And we said, we don't want any punitive. Punitive is just silly, in my personal opinion. The real point is just to keep up the neighborhood and the historic aspects as best we can. And we would be fine with a program which allows him to, in a way that fits his schedule and his money-making abilities, to replace the windows as he goes. I know that that's a burden on you. It keeps, I guess, a lien on the house. I'm not quite sure technically what happens, but we'd be fine with that. And just to clarify, I think at some point it was said he could use vinyl on the side so long as it looked from the street as though it resembled the original windows. I don't, just to clarify, we're not like real sticklers like you must have wood on the side. I think at some point Tariq suggested he could do vinyl on the side. And not knowing what it would look like in the spirit, we're fine with that as long as it looks like the original windows as you go down the street. Whatever CHAP says is correct, and whatever seems to look correct as you go down the street is what I would say, not being an architect myself. Yeah.
So there's extensive guidance on window work, which can be the original material or approved alternative materials. So we do have that provision, but there are very specific guidelines. So just any random vinyl window typically does not comply with that.
Understood. Yeah, that's why I said based upon guidelines.
Mandate to replace.
The other thing I'd like to say is to my knowledge, nobody trespassed on your yard. I took some of the photos from the side, and they were from the Juanita, your neighbor to the side. I took them from her sidewalk, just so you know, nobody would trespass on your yard.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Ms. Campany? Hearing none. Is there anyone else here in the audience who'd like to testify before the commission on this matter? Seeing none. Commissioners, let's deliberate. I guess since this is our last rodeo, I'll start.
All right, I'll start again. So this is just a shame, seeing those windows, the before and after, it was painful. Those beautiful 6/1s, lovely. But yeah, I think we have to follow staff recommendation. I'm even a little aghast at allowing sort of 1/1s on the back, but I understand that that's allowable, so it hurts.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. It does seem like the contractor has some wrongdoing here now too. That's something to deal with the contractor. But I just don't think that we can allow these to stay.
I would also offer two things. One, we need to be very cognizant of the precedent we set. If all of a sudden we start permitting people who didn't, in all earnestness, did not know were not aware of the requirements, to not have to comply, then there's no enforcement possible on the guidelines. But also, what CHAP has done in the past is not required immediate replacement, but rather work out a timetable by which, over a period of time, the building can be brought back into compliance. So, to try and give some breathing room to make sure that it's not an undue burden to come back into compliance.
We could phase in front facade, side facades, rear facades, or something of that nature to
And that
sort
could
of
be
spread out the
with
pain.
staff at that point.
Do we need to add that to a motion to
We need to-
specify that, or would that just
We
be
need to
something?
have a motion at some
staff?
point.
Yeah, I
Yes.
know, but I mean, I'm thinking of putting together one, and if I were.
I would think what we've done traditionally is sort of a schedule to make the corrections to be worked out with staff.
Yeah, so
Unless
I would make
you wanna give
a
specific guidance.
motion, and if we're done discussing, to follow staff's recommendation and allow for the schedule to be worked out between CHAP staff and the owner.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Renan. Is there any further discussion? So, the motion is to support staff recommendation to disapprove the retroactive approval of non-conforming windows on the property with a renovation schedule be worked out with staff regarding bringing the building back to compliance. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed and abstained. Motion carries. With that,
Oh my God.
it's over. There is no further business before the commission on this day, nor for this commission ever. Thank you all, and we are